My next life as a villainess, all routes lead to doom. Volume 7. Chapter 4, Lost Magic. The day after Cyrus fell in love with Maria, I went to the field together with her. I waited for her after work, and Dewey looked envious when he saw us together. I would have gladly asked him to come along if it were my field, but I couldn't do the same with Cyrus's field. Maria was an exception, since she was part of my plan to help him overcome his fear of girls, but I had no such excuse for Dewey. I apologized to him in my heart, as he looked at the two of us walking away with a sad expression. He's always so cute though. Makes you want to pat his head. On the other hand, though, Dewey was one of the characters who was supposed to bring Katarina, that is, me, to her doom, but how? Unlike Cyrus, he couldn't use magic, was shorter than me, and, most importantly, he was so cute. If anything, I think I could even win against him in a fight. Is anything the matter? Asked Maria, noticing that I was spacing out while thinking about that. Right, Maria's been working alongside Dewey all this time. I'm sure she knows a lot about him. Ah, I was just thinking Dewey's cute and small, but, can he like lift heavy stuff and such? Is he actually stronger than he lets on? Would I win against him in a fight? Is what I actually wanted to ask, but that would raise too many questions. Lady Katarina, Dewey is a boy, so he would take offense to being called cute and small, she said with a dry smile. And despite his looks, he is quite strong. He used to do a lot of manual labor at home. That was surprising, but I guess you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Now that I thought about it, I remembered hearing about him being raised in a poor, troubled household. And also about how he was picked on because of how smart he was. Maybe he was stronger than I had originally thought. Ugh. And I thought I could defeat him easily. My only hope is training to become stronger. We finally reached the field, where Cyrus was already waiting, though he looked more gussied up than usual. Hello there, he greeted us with an unusually radiant smile. Actually, he was probably mostly greeting Maria. Romance novels say that people change when they fall in love, but this was just incredible. Cyrus's fear of girls is cured, isn't it? I thought, but unfortunately he still looked nervous when talking to her. She started skillfully helping with the field, explaining that, I often helped Lady Katarina when she was farming at the academy. That's wonderful, he commented happily, showing that he had made at least some progress. After that, possibly because of the power of love, Cyrus more or less kept talking with Maria. I was positive that at this rate, he'd overcome his fear in no time. For our usual break, the blanket we were sitting on was larger than normal to make space for our new guest, and there were also sweets to go with the tea. I'm feeling some disparity in our treatment here. Oh well, a farming buddy can't compare with the girl you like, I guess. Maria, curious, tried the pickles. I have never tried anything quite like this. It is delicious, she said, munching on them with a smile. I was happy that she also liked them. We then talked about pickling practices, Cyrus's hometown, rice, and more, after which Maria started looking around herself. Apart from the field itself, the whole place seems to be cared for. Did you do all of this, Mr. Cyrus? Now that she mentioned it, the area around the field, despite the lack of a proper pathway, had a well-trimmed lawn and no large rocks lying around. It was surprising, considering how hidden away this place was. Was it Cyrus's doing, like Maria said? No, I couldn't really manage such a large place all by myself. It was like this to begin with, he said, shaking his head. Do you mean that this place was just cared for all along? Maria asked, confused. Yes. It seems that back in the day there used to be a garden here. There was a magic spell in place to keep it tidy, and it must still be working. A spell to keep the garden tidy? That kind of spell exists? I asked, interested by this type of magic I'd never heard anything about. Yet. But it's lost magic now. Lost magic? I asked. I'd never heard of that expression before. There are lots of different types of magic, right? As magic changes with the times, new types come along, and some old types become extinct. Didn't you learn about it at the academy? He said, chuckling. I turned to Maria, and she was looking flustered. Yup, turns out we did learn about it at the academy. I guess that's one downside to my forget everything I learned right after the test policy. But then, why did the garden disappear? I asked, trying to change the subject to take attention away from my ignorance. I don't know. The ministry has a long history, with new things being built and old things being torn down all the time. The garden must be something left over from a project that was abandoned a long time ago. Indeed, the ministry was as old as the kingdom itself, and a lot must have changed since its establishment. Maybe even this place, which was now empty and forgotten, had been different in the past. Right now it's just empty land, I said, looking around, but if it used to be a garden, did it have like a pond or something? There's a circle made of stones right over those bushes. Maybe there used to be a pond in the middle, said Cyrus. I'd like to see it, I said, and he looked at me like a tired father hearing his child's troublesome request. But then Maria added that she wanted to see it too, and he immediately stood up to guide us there. We followed him and reached the place that he was talking about. It was a conspicuous circle of stones around what probably used to be a pond, but it had either been filled up or had naturally dried up. The pond looked as if it had been considerably smaller than the one in the Clay's garden. Most of the stones reached up to around my knee, but there was one that was wider and about as tall as me. It kind of looked like a tombstone from my previous world. Curious whether there was a name or something written on it, I started cleaning the large, dirty stone with my handkerchief, but with very poor results. It was some really stubborn dirt. Lady Katerina, what exactly are you doing? Asked a confused-looking Maria. Oh, I was just wondering if there was anything written here. Written? On the stone? She asked, even more confused. I had never seen a tombstone in this world, so maybe they didn't exist here. That would explain her confusion. It would also mean that there probably wasn't anything written on this stone here, but I figured that I might as well keep cleaning it up just to be extra sure. After some serious rubbing and scrubbing, I finally managed to get rid of most of the dirt on the stone, but there was nothing written on it. However, I noticed that there was something sparkly. Oh? Is it a jewel or something? I scrubbed the sparkly portion even harder, so hard, in fact, that my hand slipped and I ended up scratching my skin. Ouch! It was literally just a scratch, but it stung a lot, and I was bleeding. Lady Katerina, are you okay? Maria asked while running towards me, then taking my hand into hers. You are bleeding. I will heal you. She probably meant to use her light magic to heal me, but I felt bad having her use her powers for such a small wound. That was also entirely my fault. Don't worry, it's nothing, I said, but she shook her head. It could get worse, and I wouldn't want for you to be left with a scar, she replied, so I happily accepted her offer. I let Maria grab my hurt right hand while my left one still rested on the stone. A faint light appeared out of Maria's hands. I'd already seen this happen a few times, but I was excited because this was the first time I was the one actually being healed. I stared at the faint light and all of a sudden, it turned into a blindingly bright flash. I shut my eyes, and even when I reopened them, all I could see was white light. White above, white below, white left, white right. Nothing but white as far as I could see. White, empty space. I was in front of that stone just a few seconds ago. Where is this? I was stunned, but thanks to Maria, who was still holding my hand, I managed to stay on my feet. However, she was staring at her surroundings too, looking as surprised as I was. Lady Katarina what happened to us? She asked me nervously, her voice shaking. I've got no idea either. Where are we? I asked, and noticed that my voice was a bit shaky as well. I was too scared and confused to move, but the silence made it all the scarier, so I kept talking. Just a few moments ago, we were standing in front of the stone, and suddenly, a second flash of light forced me to close my eyes again. I fearfully opened my eyes, and saw an orb of concentrated light floating in the air. It was smaller than my head, and kind of looked like a light bulb. But unlike a light bulb, it wasn't suspended from the ceiling, it was just levitating in mid-air. What is going on? What's with this light bulb? I asked, puzzled at the absurdity of this series of events. Light bulb? What's that? Asked the light bulb. Did the light bulb just speak? What? Eek. It talked. It's a ghost. Ghost. I screamed, terrified. That's a mighty rude thing to call someone, said the voice from the light bulb, sounding slightly displeased. I'm sure of it this time. The voice came from it. It talked again. What kind of ghost are you? Begone! Begone! I shouted at it. Do me a favor and shut up, will you? We won't get anywhere if you keep shouting, it said in an annoyed tone. I suddenly found that I couldn't open my mouth anymore. I was trying as hard as I could, but my lips were sealed together. I'm just making sure you'll stay quiet for a while, it explained. This thing has terrifying powers. It looks like a normal light bulb, but it's actually one heck of a ghost. And now that I look at you, you aren't even a worthy one. You just slipped up in here by mistake, didn't you? What a troublesome kid. I couldn't see the thing's face, but I was pretty sure that it was mocking me. How dare it? But I was feeling a bit calmer now. Maybe it was because I'd screamed the fear out of my system, or maybe because I couldn't scream anymore. Either way, I looked at the light bulb which, even upon closer inspection, definitely looked like nothing but a light bulb. It didn't even have any mouth. How was it speaking? And then, after forcefully shutting me up, it started speaking to Maria. Oh, it seems that you're a worthy one, young girl. Worthy one? What's it talking about? Me? Worthy? Maria asked, obviously scared and confused as well. She's such a polite girl though. A light bulb starts speaking, and she just replies to it. A worthy one, yes, a wielder of light, it explained as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. I still have no idea what it's talking about, but what I know is that I really don't like this thing's condescending tone. I am a wielder of light, Maria said with a thoughtful expression. I know. Do you long for greater powers? Greater powers? You mean more powerful magic? No. It's not about making your magic more powerful, it's about learning how to control it. What does that mean? I will teach you all I know about controlling magic. And that will make you much more powerful. More powerful? Maria said, looking at the orb and then, inexplicably, at me. Her eyes were staring into mine. Maria? What's up? I couldn't speak, so I had to communicate by blinking. Maria nodded at me, as if to say that everything would be all right, before looking back at the light bulb. Her expression went from scared and confused to intense and fierce. I want greater powers, she said clearly. The light bulb grinned. Well, it didn't have a mouth, so it didn't really grin, but it felt like it did. I see. It said, satisfied. If that's the case, find the covenant and come back to me. Then, I will teach you everything I know. What? She has to do stuff for him before getting her powers? And what's a covenant? My head was full of questions, but since my mouth was sealed, I had to keep them to myself. Excuse me, this covenant you speak of. Maria started speaking. However, the light bulb interrupted her, simply saying I'll be waiting, and there was yet another flash of light. When we opened our eyes, we were back in front of the stone. What was that just now? Maria and I looked at each other. Hey, Maria, that thing just now. I started saying, but then Cyrus came running towards us, visibly shaken. Hey! Are you two okay? Where did you disappear off to? He said that he saw Maria and me disappear instantly, and then he'd started running around to look for us. And when I looked back at the stone, you were back there. What happened? He asked, but I was still too confused to explain it properly, so Maria started talking instead. To be honest, I am still trying to understand it myself. She started, and went on to tell him what we had seen: the flashes of light, the white space, and the floating orb. I'm so glad she was with me. I'd never be able to explain something that weird so well. If I hadn't seen you two disappear with my own two eyes, I'd have a hard time believing you, Cyrus said. But after seeing how you vanished and then reappeared in the blink of an eye, it makes sense that you were transported somewhere else. He reflected silently for a while before speaking again. This could be lost magic as well. It could be a spell placed here by the very person who built this garden way back when. That'd explain why the garden is being magically kept tidy to this day. So was it true, what the light orb said? Could it really grant me greater power? Maria asked. I have no proof, but I'd say it's likely. As technology has advanced, magic users have become fewer, and their powers have become weaker. A lot of magic has been lost to time. If you could get some of that back, you'd definitely become more powerful, no doubt about it, Cyrus said, and Maria's face relaxed into a smile. I see. If so, I want to try my best to obtain that power. I will have to look for the covenant that the orb was talking about. I wonder where it is. If it is a book of some kind, perhaps it is in the library. Hold your horses. Do you want to go to the library right now? It's already closed at this hour. And how do you plan on looking for something that you know nothing about? Cyrus stopped Maria, who looked ready to run to the library that very second. That is true. I should ask that light orb once again, she said, making for the stone. Wait, it's too late today. If you want to do that, wait until tomorrow, he said, and we decided to go rest for the day. Maria and Cyrus saw me to the carriage. They both lived in the dormitory, so they would be going back there together. Maria Campbell looks tame, but she can be intense. Hey! Cyrus whispered to me. He was probably talking about how she wanted to go look for that covenant right away. Yes. She isn't just some docile girl, I said. She was the protagonist of an Otome game, after all. She was a strong girl who didn't just wait to be saved, but who ran straight into danger when she had to protect her friends. I'll have you know that my friend is cute and strong, sir. I left my 2 colleagues and rode back home, thinking of the weird events of that day. A white, empty space. A talking light bulb. Maria's sudden eagerness. Just as Cyrus said, she could be intense at times. That said, today she sounded even too eager, as if she were in a rush. Or was that just my imagination? She already has the ring made by Larna to increase her powers, so why would she need to become stronger? She's always working so hard, she should learn how to relax. What kind of Otome game protagonist works harder than the love interests? I wish that Cyrus would learn from her and try a bit harder to overcome his fears without running away. Ah! I just left those 2 alone, but did Cyrus properly see Maria back to her room? I was so confused with all that stuff going on that I forgot about that. I hope he did. I was so worried about it that I didn't even manage to fall asleep on the carriage like I always did. After seeing Katerina off to her carriage, Mr. Cyrus and I walked back to the dormitory together while talking about my plans. For example, we discussed how, if I really could achieve the powers that the light orb talked about, the ministry itself could be interested in aiding my search. But unfortunately, I had no proof that what I'd heard was true. Mr. Cyrus told me that he would report to his superiors and look into it, and that I should not do anything rash in the meantime. There's nothing to gain from scrambling ahead. There are too many unknown variables to this whole thing. Diving in head first could be dangerous, he told me with a serious expression that left me no option but to agree. Anyway, he said right before we parted ways, your light magic is already much stronger than anybody else's. Why do you even want greater powers? I thought for a bit before replying. I do not want others to protect me anymore. I want to be the one to protect them, I said, looking him straight in the eye. I see, he said, before saying goodbye and making for his room. I went back to mine, where I changed clothes and prepared for the next workday. I was too tired to go to the dining hall, so I made do with the sweets I had in my room before going to bed. Today's strange events had left me exhausted. I had been so happy to be able to spend time with Lady Katerina after so long, and then all of a sudden we were transported to that mysterious place. Hearing those incredible things, it all seemed like a strange dream. But it was not. Lady Katerina experienced the same things, and Mr. Cyrus also saw the 2 of us disappear. The covenant, I did not know what that was, but I wanted to find it and become more powerful. Since the time we first met at the academy, Lady Katerina had always been the one protecting me. Every time I was in danger of being hurt, either physically or mentally, she would come out of nowhere to rescue me. Even when I was kidnapped, she was the first one to show up. And even during the examination, when we fought that dragon creature that was so scary. Not the dragon, but thinking that Katerina could have died because of me. Had that happened, I doubted that I could have kept on living as before. I did not want Katerina to stand in front of me to protect me, but I knew that she would never hesitate to do so, over and over. I knew that she was that kind of person, and that was one of the reasons why I held her so close to my heart. I wanted the power to protect her. I needed much stronger magic, and I had reason to need it as soon as possible. Ever since the examination ended and we came back to the ministry, I could ever so slightly feel an aura, a presence, an evil one. And I got the feeling that this presence was out to get Lady Katerina. It could all be my imagination, but I could not help but feel scared. At the academy, Lady Katarina was once publicly shamed for things that she had never done. We later found out that it was all part of someone else's plan, but the feeling that I had at the ministry reminded me of the one from back then. It felt as if the universe was conspiring to take a loved one away from me. I absolutely did not want to lose Lady Katarina. I was ready to fight anyone, even the universe itself, in order to avoid that, and that was why I needed power. Lots of it. And fast. I hoped in my heart that I could quickly find the covenant. The day after meeting the lightbulb, I visited Maria's department during lunch break because I was curious about what she planned to do next. I had Sora come along with me, in case we'd be eating lunch with Maria and Dewey like on the previous day. Mr. Cyrus reported to his superiors this morning, and now we are waiting for their reply before doing anything, she explained to me. I see. So you're not going to start moving just yet? Exactly, she said with a disappointed look. Maria, I've told you this already, but don't push yourself too hard, okay? Learn how to relax. Breathe in, breathe out. In, out. In, out. What does that have to do with anything? Sora asked, making Maria laugh. After that, we called for Dewey and the four of us went to eat lunch together again. I finished my lunch, today's special, stew, while chatting with Maria and the others, and before I knew it lunch break was over. Once I was back in the office and was preparing for that afternoon's work, Lorna came back out of nowhere and told me and Sora to come to her desk because she had to speak with us. At first I feared that we'd done something wrong and that she was going to scold us, but Lorna looked pretty happy. As Sora and I walked towards her, I wondered what she wanted to speak to us about. I actually just received a mission from the higher-ups, and I want you two to help, she said, grinning. What mission would that be? It's about looking for lost magic. Lost magic again? I've been hearing those words a lot since yesterday. And the mission will be undertaken jointly by our department and the Magical Powers Research Department. The Magical Powers Research Department? Wait, could it mean that we were looking for that lost magic? I stared at Lorna, eager to hear the rest. Katarina looks like she already knows what's going on. It's just what you think it is, the lost magic you and Maria ran into yesterday, she said, before quickly explaining the details to Sora, who knew nothing about that incident. You got in trouble again, he murmured in my direction. I tried to explain that it wasn't my fault this time. I mean, it never was my fault, trouble just seemed to follow me around. I couldn't do anything about it. Anyway, Sora just sighed wearily at my explanation. Lorna, who wasn't really interested in our little quarrel, went back to talking enthusiastically about the mission. We've been able to recreate some kinds of lost magic as far as keeping places tidy and such goes, but I've never heard of one that can transport people to another dimension. This is so interesting. I'd heard from my older colleagues that Lorna was so into magic that she always went crazy about rare or interesting types of it. I'd also heard that when that happened, she forgot about everything else including work. Seeing how excited she was, I started worrying for the department's well-being. Let me explain about this mission, said Cyrus. After hearing Lorna's explanation, we moved to a conference room. Maria, Dewey, and Cyrus had come from the Magical Powers Research Department to join Lorna, Sora, and me. Apart from the two directors, the rest of us were all newcomers. I wondered why that was. Maybe it was some kind of test. However, Cyrus told us that there weren't enough people available to dispatch on a mission that was based on such dubious information. Looking very sad, he added that he would still be attending to his normal director responsibilities, and that he couldn't help us that much throughout. "Don't worry, Cyrus, I'll take responsibility here," said Larna, who was oozing enthusiasm. "What about your responsibilities as department director?" Cyrus asked, perplexed. "I have very talented employees to whom I can entrust everything. I'll focus on looking for the lost magic," she explained casually. "There you go again, Raphael Wolt is going to get fed up with you," he said, his face having gone from perplexed to stern. "There's no reason to worry about that." "And on what basis can you say that?" "Absolutely none. Speaking with you stresses me out," Cyrus said with a sigh. Anyone could tell that these two were incompatible. Larna was too unconcerned about everything, and Cyrus too concerned. "My department colleagues had already assured me that you can mostly ignore whatever Larna says when she's not talking about work. I asked for your help because you're the most knowledgeable about lost magic around here, but let's just operate independently as two departments. We'll both gather information and then compare and contrast here," said Cyrus, who obviously didn't want to work with Larna, and we started working as he said. I had been looking forward to working together with Maria, so I was a bit sad about that. But we would still be able to meet when exchanging information, so I decided to do my best regardless. "But where are we even going to look for information?" I asked once we were out of the meeting room, unsure of what we were supposed to do next. "First of all, we'll go see someone who's an expert on lost magic," Larna said joyfully. "You know such a person?" "Yes. He chases down lost and rare types of magic. He's sort of a weird guy." If someone as weird as Larna was saying that, I could only wonder what kind of guy that could be. "He doesn't live in the ministry, so we'll have to ride on a carriage," she said before starting to march away, with Sora and I doing our best to keep up with her. The carriage brought us to a residential district not far away from the castle. The people living there weren't nobles, but they were definitely well off. Larna knocked on the door of a house that size made it stand out even among the many large ones of that neighborhood. Someone, probably a servant, came out to greet us. They recognized Larna, bowed to her, and led us inside. "Is the professor doing well?" Larna asked. "Yes, he is as full of energy as usual," the servant replied. "So we were here to see a professor." Larna had said that this man was an expert in lost magic, so maybe he was a teacher at a magic school. Deep inside the house, we reached a closed door. The servant stopped in front of it and started speaking to someone on the other side. "Master, you have visitors. May I open the door?" Instead of a parlor, the servant led us directly to the professor's room. "Oh, hold on a second," a man inside the room replied. We heard rumbling and rattling. After a short while, the same man said, "There, come in." What was all that noise just now? I thought to myself, but I discovered the answer the second the servant opened the door and we walked inside. I stared in awe with my mouth hanging open. The whole room was full of stacks upon stacks of books and documents, so many that anyone who was inside it during an earthquake would be buried under an avalanche of paper. That noise was probably the professor shoving some of those books aside. And there he was, near the door, an old man with white hair and a white, bushy mustache, looking somewhat like Santa Claus. "Oh, miss, it's been a while. How have you been?" he said upon seeing Larna, beaming at her with a smile so large that he looked like he was squinting. "Well. And I am glad to see you doing fine as well, Professor," Larna replied with a smile. "I have come here with some of my subordinates because there is something that I would like to ask you. May we have some of your time?" I see, said the old man. It's a bit messy, but be my guests. He pointed to a table in the center of the room with some chairs around it. The servant who had welcomed us had quickly cleaned it up so that it was the only surface not completely covered in books. I was touched by the speed cleaning when I noticed that the servant had also prepared tea and snacks for us. Impressive. We sat down facing the professor, and Larna introduced us. These are my subordinates, Katarina Clays and Sora Smith. I am Katarina Clays. It is my pleasure. I am Sora Smith. It is my pleasure. The man in front of us then spoke. I am Morris Hyde. The pleasure is mine. People call me professor and doctor and whatnot, but I'm nothing more than an old man. Call me Morris, or Hyde, or whatever you like, he said, laughing. He looked like a pleasant, kind old man. But since it wouldn't be polite to call him by his name or give him a new nickname, Sora, and I decided to follow Larna's example and just call him Professor. Sora and I told him about our backgrounds while drinking tea. I said that I was the daughter of a duke, and Sora talked about his story of scraping by as an orphan. This story was enough to surprise most people, but the professor didn't bat an eye and just kept nodding and listening intently. We also heard a few things about him, giving me the impression that he was a close acquaintance of Larna's and that he was not an ordinary person. The professor nickname, he told us, stuck with him because he used to work as a private teacher for noble children even though he had never actually taught in a school. The doctor one was given to him by some of his friends to taunt him for being so passionate about researching lost magic. But he wasn't a researcher by trade and only looked into things that caught his interest as a hobby. After chatting for a while, he took a sip of his tea and asked Larna what it was that she wanted to talk about. You see, we have just found an unheard of type of lost magic on the ministry's grounds, she said. Then as if she'd been waiting all along for the opportunity to do so. She explained about how Maria and I were transported into another dimension and how a floating light orb had told Maria to find a covenant. She explained everything in such detail that Sora started worrying. Excuse me, Miss Larna, but is it appropriate to disclose all of this to people outside the ministry? He whispered to her. Oh, don't worry. I've got permission. And the professors from the ministry too, anyway. His name is still on the records, but he's already retired, as you can see, she said nonchalantly. My name is still on those records? I've retired. Tell them to erase that, will you? The professor said. That is out of my jurisdiction, she said, deflecting the request. More importantly, do you know anything about this lost magic? That is your specialty, is it not? More importantly? Miss, you should learn to be a bit more never mind, it's too late for that. A different dimension, a light orb, and a covenant, you say? The professor started thinking while staring at the ceiling. After a while he stood up, walked to a bookshelf, the whole room was basically a giant bookshelf, to be honest, and started looking for something. Not wanting to disturb him as he seemed so concentrated in his search, we waited while silently drinking our tea. Oh, here it is. Found it, he said after a while, bringing a book back with him to the table. A friend gave this to me many years ago, and I made a translation into our modern language. The content was so unrealistic that I just left it to collect dust on a shelf, but here, take a look, he said, opening up the book and moving it towards us. More than the usual magic manuals that we saw at the ministry, this looked like a fairy tale book, aimed at what in my previous world would be called grade schoolers, with pictures and all. Excuse me, isn't this a made-up story, like a fairy tale? I asked. Exactly, said the professor. It's from a very old book of stories for children. Just as I thought. How could that help us? But forget that and take a look. Here, he said, pointing to a specific part of the text. And the prince was led into the garden which had been created with magic. There he met the shining goddess, who told him, if you want greater powers, find the covenant and come back here. I will do so, replied the prince. The content of the story was exactly the same as what had happened to me and Maria on the previous day. But why? Isn't this supposed to be fiction? The professor laughed at my surprised reaction. Sometimes, old books talk about magic that was the norm back then and only just so happens to be lost now. Of course, some of them are pure fiction. Professor, when was this written, and by whom? Asked Lorna, leaning forward with eagerness. Miss, I understand your passion for magic, but please calm down. I'll explain everything from the start, he said with a smile. The only information I have on this story is that it's very old. I don't know who wrote it, or when. The book that my translation comes from was given to me by a friend in the first place. This friend knew his way around magic, and was convinced that the story was based on magic that once really existed. However, no matter how much I searched for evidence, I found none. I just translated it so that children could read it, seeing as it's a children's book anyway, but I'd completely forgotten about it until today. So you know nothing about the book. What about your friend? Lorna asked promptly, but the professor shook his head. If he were to hear of what happened, my friend would surely be ecstatic knowing that the magic is actually real. However, he's not with us anymore, and I know nothing about how he got that book. Which means that we have no information at all. Lorna said, visibly disappointed. I told you to calm down. You really haven't changed at all, miss, the professor said, frustrated but amused. I may not know about the book's origin, but the way to obtain the covenant is written right here. Really? Where? Lorna asked enthusiastically, and the professor reached for the book and started flipping its pages. After he found what he was looking for, he showed it to us. The goddess told the prince how to find the covenant so that he may obtain the power that he wanted. The covenant will draw to itself those who truly wish to find it. And, as soon as you find it, you will know. The prince thanked the goddess and left the garden. So we just have to start looking for it and then we'll just find it? I asked, with my head resting on one hand. That seems to be the case, the professor said while stroking his mustache. That doesn't tell us a lot about how to obtain it, though. I said, unsure how to feel about that non-answer. Furthermore, the professor continued, we can't tell whether all that the book tells is true. The author may have embellished the facts. I thought we'd finally found a hint, but we're back at square one. Do you know of anything else that could help us? Lorna asked, trying to find even the smallest piece of information to work with. I'm sorry, but this is all I know, he said, but he let us borrow the book. We thanked him and made to leave the Hyde Manor. Right before we did so, the professor told us something. I don't know if knowing this would be useful to you, but in the story, the prince found the covenant in the form of a book in the largest library in the kingdom. After that, Lorna said that she would go questioning people who potentially held useful knowledge, and Sora and I were appointed to search the kingdom's largest library. The one in the magical ministry. The professor's room was so full of books and documents and all kinds of papers, I said while we were still in the carriage. That had impressed me the most out of anything. He's always loved collecting old and rare documents and manuscripts for his research. He has a research room, but it's completely full of papers, Larna explained. He had enough texts lying around to fill his research room and overflow into his study and guest rooms. His wife lives with him, but she doesn't want him to dump any more paper inside the rooms. Living in a house so full of books and documents must be hard. But there was something else I was wondering about. Miss Larna, you're on really friendly terms with the professor, aren't you? She knew about his family, and she spoke very politely when addressing him. What's more, the professor looked at her with the same kindness as a grandfather looking at his granddaughter. Larna giggled, squinting slightly in a way that reminded me of the professor. Yeah, we've known each other since I was a child. I used to go to his research room all the time. This explained the way he looked at her. He really did have the eyes of a grandfather, thinking, you've grown so much. So if you didn't become acquaintances at the ministry, how did you two first meet? Since she said that he'd known her since she was a child, that must have been before she started working at the ministry. There were sometimes people around the ministry who didn't work there, but it certainly wasn't a place for children to play around in. I used to know one of his friends. One day I was bored, and he told me he'd bring me to an interesting place, which happened to be the professor's research room. I was so excited seeing all those books about magic around me, she explained with a hint of nostalgia in her voice. Were you already interested in magic back then? I asked, recalling what my colleagues had told me about her. Researching magic is something of a life mission for me, she said with an innocent smile. The carriage finally reached the ministry, and Sora and I went to the library while Larna was asking more people for information. Sure, going to the library is the easy part, but now what? This place is huge and full of books. How are we going to find a single one which we don't even know anything about? Since we have no clue, what do you think about beginning from the start and looking through each book in order? I said, but Sora looked at me in dismay. That's never going to work, he said. We should at least narrow our options. But how? Even if we, say, ignored all romance novels and just looked at the books on magic, most books here are about magic anyway. I said, pouting, and Sora sighed while putting a hand to his forehead. That's not what I meant. We're looking for an ancient magic book, right? So it can't be among recent books. We should ask where they keep the oldest books and start searching from there, he said. You're right. Sora, you're so smart. I'm not. You should just use your head a bit more. Following Sora's suggestion, we asked the librarian sitting at the counter where the oldest books were being kept. Oh? You two are also looking for ancient books? What a coincidence. Usually nobody ever cares much for those, she told us, implying that someone else had already visited that area today. I think the other people are still there, so try to cooperate and not take up all the space, okay? We went in the direction that she guided us to and found Maria and Dewey concentrating on reading some books. They were probably definitely looking for the Covenant. As soon as Sora and I stepped near them, they noticed us and looked up from their books. Lady Katarina. Sora. Maria said in surprise. Dewey, too, was staring at us with fluttering eyes. Oh, hi Maria, hi Dewey. We've come here to look for the Covenant too. I looked around, but didn't see Cyrus anywhere. Isn't Mr. Cyrus with you? He has gone to question some people who may have useful information, and he also has his normal duties to attend to, Maria explained. As newcomers, the four of us could focus entirely on our search, but the directors had to balance this mission with their usual day-to-day work. That must be tough. Wait, that's true for Cyrus, but Larna said something about entrusting her work to subordinates, so it's the people left at the department who have it tough. My imagination went to Raphael and his desk, barely visible under a mountain of documents, and I decided that I had to find the Covenant as soon as possible. Why are you two in the library? Pray tell, have you found any useful information? While I was busy thinking, Sora asked Maria and Dewey with the most polite speech he could muster. Mr. Cyrus told us to ask several researchers about it, Dewey said, but none of them have ever heard of any magic like this, leaving us with no clue. We are looking through these old texts to see if there is any mention of a kind of magic like the one in the garden. So you aren't looking for the Covenant itself? Well, of course we would be more than happy to find it, but I doubt things will play out that well, Dewey replied calmly. He was so mature for a 13-year-old at that age. I was romping around the mountains in my previous world and in the garden in this one. I was looking at Dewey, appreciating how much of a grown-up he was, when our eyes met. Lady Katarina, did you happen to find anything? Why, yes, we found a children's book, I said, and both Dewey and Maria stared at me questioningly. I may have left out too much of the story there. Sora, after aiming a look of disapproval in my direction, started explaining the whole story behind our coming to the library. Our meeting with Professor Hyde, what he had told us, the book we read, and its contents. That professor must be an incredibly smart person to be able to remember that book just by hearing your story, Maria said in admiration. Do you have the book with you right now? Dewey asked. Miss Larna took it to do some more research, so you will be able to see it if she comes here, Sora replied. That means that if we keep searching, we may just happen to find it. And if the Covenant is really supposed to be in the largest library in the kingdom, I am glad to know that searching this place was not a terrible idea after all, Maria said. She looked so relieved that I couldn't bring myself to tell her that the professor had said that we had no way of knowing which parts of the book were true, if any. With that, Sora and I joined Maria and Dewey's search. How have you been looking through the books? In the order that they're placed on the shelves? I asked. No, said Dewey, surprised. We have been looking at them in chronological order, from oldest to most recent. Since nobody had heard of that magic, it is likely that it is very ancient. Dewey, you're so smart. Dewey blushed as he laughed off my comment, but Sora gave me one of his wry looks and whispered, so quietly that only I could hear it, I told you to use your head a bit more. Using my head has never been my forte. I think I can manage to look through some books though. Okay then, we'll start searching with you. Sora and I went to the shelf that Maria showed us, the one that had the oldest books on it, and took some that hadn't been checked yet. I froze. These old books have no pictures or charts, they're so boring. What's wrong? Sora said, noticing how I wasn't moving at all. I can't read this, I told him sadly. Surprised, he looked at my book. And why is that? He asked. That meant that he was able to read it. This is ancient script, I replied. The book wasn't written in our modern, everyday language, but in an old one that I couldn't understand. Do you mean you can read it, Sora? How? It's just that I once fell in love with a girl who said she liked ancient I just learned it because I needed it for work. Didn't you learn how to read it at the academy? He replied with a further question. Sure, there were lessons on ancient script at the academy, just like the ones on classical Japanese that we had in school back in my old world. But to be honest, I never liked either of those subjects. I only studied as hard as I could before tests, having my smart friends teach me the most important parts and just memorizing those. As soon as I passed one of those tests with the bare minimum of required points, the information I'd crammed inside my brain would just evaporate, leaving nothing behind. This had already been one of my special skills in my previous life. I called it forgetting useless stuff. Because of this, I couldn't read a single letter. Just to make it clear, not even word, but letter. Not a single one. Since there wasn't much point in lying, I admitted to everyone that I couldn't read any of it. Maria and Dewey were also surprised, and the latter, just like Sora had done, asked me how that could be possible, since I was supposed to have studied that at the academy. I started feeling really bummed out, and I stared at the floor in a mixture of embarrassment and self-pity. But were you not able to read that old story at Professor Hyde's place? Dewey asked. No, that was a modern translation that the professor had made so that children could read it, Sora explained for me. Now that I thought about it, that was obvious. There was no way that such an old story would be written in modern language, and I only had the professor to thank for being able to understand it. Back at his house, the thought just hadn't occurred to me. But this is quite the problem. If she cannot read ancient script, she will not be able to check most of the books in this area, said Dewey, looking troubled. Yup, said Sora, who, maybe because of how disappointed in me he was, had forgotten about using polite speech. What am I going to do? I'm completely useless. If that is the case, you could check stories instead of these ancient books, Maria said. Stories? What do you mean? I asked as I looked up, noticing her smile. The hint that you found was inside a story, so you could try checking other stories written in modern script. They could hold something valuable. Maria, my angel, why are you always so kind? I guess that could be true. Sora said. Yes, there is certainly a possibility. Dewey said. And thus, I started looking through stories. Thanks to Maria, I avoided being completely useless. She was such a good girl that I considered fighting off all the love interests to marry her myself. I thanked my beautiful angel for her kindness and made for the area where the storybooks were being kept. It's all boring stories, I murmured to myself while flipping the pages. The storybooks were kept near the library's entrance, in a place easily visible from the librarian's counter. Most of the texts here were technical books on magic, but there were also normal story books, if only a few. Of course there were no romance novels, though. However, these stories weren't particularly exciting. They were the kind of classical story that you'd find in a school textbook. The writing was also full of metaphors, making it difficult to understand. Oh well, still better than those ancient books though. At least I can read these. Thank you, Maria. A lot of these stories had a prince as protagonist, and he would usually end up married to a kind and beautiful princess or other noble girl. The explanation of how the protagonist used magic to defeat the villain was always so lengthy and detailed that it made you forget about the story itself. Do we really need this many details? After all, I was looking for hints about lost magic, so I couldn't skip those parts, but most of the magic featured in the books was of the kind I'd already heard about anyway. While I was focusing on one of the books, someone entered the library and started talking to me. Miss Katarina? What are you doing here by yourself? I looked up and saw that it was Cyrus. Oh, Mr. Cyrus, are you done with work? Not yet, but I wanted to check on Maria and Dewey. What a proper, thoughtful boss. I see. They're reading through ancient texts right now. I know that, but sorry to ask again, but what are you doing here by yourself? Me? I'm reading through these story books. Stories? And why would that be? He said, looking perplexed. I explained about the story that the professor had shown us, and Cyrus responded, he showed you a book like that? As expected of Morris Hyde, he's so knowledgeable. You know him. He's famous as a great scholar, you know. Well, he's also infamous for his difficult personality, which makes it difficult for people to talk to him despite his undeniable intelligence, he said. This was surprising to hear. What? He wasn't like that at all. He let us in to talk to him in his room without a hitch. That's probably because Lorna Smith was with you. I've heard she used to live amongst royalty, so she must have lots of connections. She did say that she'd known the professor since she was a child. Wait, did you say that she used to live with royalty? Despite being her subordinate, I didn't know much about Lorna apart from her knack for disguise and her passion for magic. Yes, I heard so directly from her, but I don't know anything about her family. Some say that she's a noble, but nobody except for a few of the higher-ups knows for sure about her background. It turned out that my superior's background was classified. There are a lot of people like that in the ministry, though. Just look at me. I come from a small farming village, but people treat me like a high-ranking noble, Cyrus said, laughing at himself. Then he got back to the subject at hand. I understand why you'd want to look through these books, but why are you doing it alone? There aren't that many here, so wouldn't it be faster if you all cooperated and got it over with quickly? Ugh, this is so embarrassing. I wish I didn't have to explain it. Well, actually, I told him about how I couldn't read ancient script. You graduated from the Academy of Magic, correct? Yes. And they teach ancient script there, correct? Yes. Confused, he looked at me silently. I felt so bad that I once again stared at the floor as I murmured, I could read it back then, but after the tests I just kind of forgot all of it. After a few moments of unbearable silence, Cyrus spoke again. I see, he said. Keep checking these books. He then went off to the area where Maria and the others were looking at the ancient texts, so I followed his order and kept doing my best to flip through the pages. As the end of the workday grew closer, Lorna came back and told us that she'd already interviewed several people. We then went back to the same conference room where we had been debriefed in the morning. Cyrus, being the one in charge, spoke first. I have asked historians and ancient magic researchers in and around the ministry, but all of them said that they had never heard of any such magic. I sent Maria and Dewey to research ancient magic texts. Did you two find anything? Maria and Dewey looked at each other, and the latter spoke. We have checked dozens of books on ancient magic, but none of them mentioned the spell we were looking for. However, there still are several books that we have not yet checked. I see. Good work. Keep on searching those books, then, Cyrus said to Maria and Dewey, before turning to the people from the magical tool laboratory. Please tell us what you've found. We'd already told them about the professor's book, but Lorna explained everything in detail once more. She might have been a problem child of sorts within the ministry, but she really was smart. Her explanation was comprehensive and easy to understand, so much so that Cyrus, who had only heard the story from me, was surprised by several points throughout. After leaving us, Lorna had gone to find more information about the book, but, unfortunately, she had found none. I'm planning to go farther from the ministry tomorrow to ask more people about the book, but I don't expect to find anything. The story said that the Covenant will draw to itself those who look for it, and the library in the ministry is the largest one in the kingdom. Realistically, that's our best bet at finding it, she said, and so it was decided that we'd be searching in the library on the following day as well. The workday was now over, but Maria said that she would go back to the library to do some more research. There's no rush, Cyrus said, stopping her. You're still a newcomer, and you aren't used to working here yet. It's way too soon to overwork yourself. Despite what he said, Cyrus went back to his office to finish his own work. He probably wouldn't have time to tend to the field and relax for a while. Maybe because she was influenced by his diligence, Lorna said that she'd be going to her office too, leaving us 4 newbies in the meeting room. We prepared to go back home, and despite the fact that everyone but me actually lived in the dormitory, they all casually followed me all the way to the gate. While we walked there, the conversation was naturally drawn towards the topic of searching through the books. You guys are all so incredible, being able to read through all of those heavy, difficult books, I said in awe. I haven't read even half of what those 2 have. They're the awesome ones, Sora said. He wasn't trying to speak politely anymore, probably because he'd gotten used to Maria and Dewey. Not at all, said Maria, smiling at her younger colleague. Dewey has done much more than I have. He is so smart. Dewey's face instantly turned red. Seeing his love grow in real time like that was really endearing. We eventually reached the gate, and I hopped into the carriage. Tomorrow would be another long day of searching through books. Chapter 5, The Covenant. We all kept looking for hints about the Covenant for a few more days, but we had no luck. After all, it took a lot of time for the prince from the book too. There weren't any details about the number of days, but it said that he had looked in a cave full of monsters, a dark forest, and more before finally finding it. I briefly considered looking for the Covenant in caves and forests ourselves, but when I thought about it, it didn't really make sense. Why would you go there to look for a book? Wouldn't you start with the library? But maybe he was able to find the Covenant in the library exactly because he had suffered those failures in other places. Maybe we should go fighting Tanuki in the forest, I murmured while looking through a book. Stop talking nonsense and focus on looking for hints, said Sora sternly. That was my way of looking for hints, but seeing the face that Sora was making made me reconsider how good my Tanuki idea was. After a few days, thanks to the efforts of the talented Maria and Dewey, we finished looking through most of the old books. I had already finished looking through the story books since there weren't that many to begin with. All that was left to do was for Maria and Dewey to look through the remaining ancient script books, while Sora and I read through those that, while also old, were written in our modern language. Cyrus and Lorna, in the meantime, kept working on their normal duties while interviewing people. Lorna, to be precise, was having her subordinates take care of her normal duties. However, no matter how many books we checked, none of them said anything about the Covenant. Since Professor Hyde had found a new hint for us in so little time, I'd been expecting things to go more smoothly. I was getting tired of spending day after day staring at letters, and I remembered nostalgically the manual labor and cleaning I'd done before that. I wondered how much longer it would take before our search was finished and I could get back to that. I can't even focus my eyes anymore. I wasn't used to reading difficult books. I had no problem with romance novels, but doing this kind of research for several days in a row was taking its toll on me. It's going to be lunch break soon, so why don't you go on ahead and rest? I'll follow you as soon as I'm done with this book, said Sora, seeing how exhausted I was. I did as he said and left the library. I didn't hate libraries, per se in fact, I loved the libraries of my old world, full of all kinds of novels. But after all the reading I'd done in the past few days, just being there was enough to make me feel tired. Breathing some fresh air instantly made me feel better. I'll have a nice lunch and then do my best again in the afternoon, I said to myself. Katarina. It was the voice of someone who I hadn't expected to see here. Jedord. Prince Jedord? What are you doing here? I have come to the ministry for training. What a pleasant surprise to see you here, he said with a smile. After graduating from the academy, all of my friends had started working. The nobles mainly took after their parents' duties, which is what Keith did. I'd heard that Jedord and Alan, as royalty, were now much busier with diplomatic work than they were last year. Last time I went to the castle, Jedord had mentioned that he'd just come back from something like that. Despite being this busy, he was also training at the ministry. I knew he was an overachiever, but that sounded like a bit too much. You're training? Aren't you tired? Jedord was usually smiling as if nothing could stop him. That made sense to me when I was playing the game and he was just a character, meant to be charming above all, but now he was a real person, who could get tired and even hurt. The problem was how good he was at hiding that. Thank you, but I am fine. You, on the other hand, seem quite exhausted. What is the matter? Does it show that much? I've been doing research for work, but with no results. Of course I couldn't disclose any details, but I figured that saying that much would be fine. After thinking for a moment, Jedord replied. It is often the case that when you cannot find something, it was right beside you all along. Is that a quote? I asked, intrigued. Yes. Mine. I dropped my jaw in surprise, and, while my mouth was still open, Jedord threw something inside it. What? I was obviously surprised at first, but quickly realized that it was a piece of chocolate. Nothing quite like eating sweets when you need energy. Next time you are free, by all means, let us partake of some delicious dessert together, he said while gently caressing my head. Whether it was because of the sweet chocolate melting in my mouth or because I was being patted on the head, I started feeling warm inside. Sora then came out of the library as well, and was as surprised as I was to see Jedord. I have heard that you are looking after my Katarina here at the ministry. You have my gratitude, the prince told him. Oh, no need to mention it, Sora, somewhat taken aback, replied. The bell signaling lunch break rang, and we were joined by Maria and Dewey. Jedord, after greeting the two, reminded me of his invitation and then left. The four of us then went to the dining hall together. Along the way, I heard Sora murmur to himself, "Phew, that was scary." He was smiling, but his eyes were burning. Was he trying to threaten me or something? He sounded tired from all the reading as well, so I decided to give him a couple of good recommendations for lunch. After recharging with a good meal, we went back to work. Once again, I was silently flipping through the pages of relatively ancient books together with Sora. I kept reading and reading, but found nothing useful. I let out a big sigh. You are working really hard, I heard someone say from behind me. It was the smiling librarian, who had come to put some books back. She must have heard me sighing. I'd spent the last few days in the library, so she was getting used to seeing me. Yes, I'm looking for something, but I can't find it no matter how much I search, I said. That must be tough. I only wish I could help you somehow, she replied, looking preoccupied as she saw my clearly exhausted face. Thank you, I really appreciate that. If you are having that much trouble finding what you are looking for, perhaps it is back in the Forbidden Library, she said with a laugh. Forbidden Library? What is that? You have never heard about it. Not until now. I see perhaps people outside my department do not hear about it as much, she said, referring to the library department. As it turned out, the existence of this forbidden library was common knowledge there. It is a special section of the library that only a few select people can enter. What? That kind of thing exists? I said, and she laughed again. Ha ha ha, of course not. There are a lot of rumors about it, but that is natural for a place as old as the ministry. Every department has its own stories and myths. Oh. I said, disappointed, and she gave me a few words of encouragement before returning to the counter. If there really is such a place as the Forbidden Library, the Covenant just has to be in there. If this was a game, it'd be a given. You open the door and there it is, the Shining Covenant, waiting to be picked up. Too bad we aren't in a game. Wait, what? A game? Scratch that, we are in a game. And FL2 is set in the ministry. With that in mind, I realized that the Forbidden Library probably did exist. I looked at Sora, who was close enough to have heard the conversation between me and the librarian. Hey Sora, what do you think of that? I think it's worth a shot. We should probably tell the others about it, he said after thinking for a while. And so, we went to the corner of the library where Maria and Dewey were sitting. This word connects to this one, you see. Oh, you're right. Dewey, you're so smart. The two were hunched together over a single book, with Dewey explaining something difficult to Maria. His face now looked red and very happy. I can't interrupt his moment of joy like this. Maybe I should wait, I thought to myself. I know what you're thinking, but we have no time for that, Sora told me before barging in. He could be so cold. Since Sora's entrance had disrupted any semblance of romance anyway, I followed him up to our two friends and explained what I'd heard from the librarian. I have never heard about this Forbidden Library, said Dewey, looking thoughtful. Neither have I, but we are still newcomers, after all. Maybe Mr. Lanchester or Miss Larna knows something about it, said Maria. That made sense even if we didn't know about it, our bosses, who'd been working here for years, might. But the librarian said that it was only a rumor, right? Asked Dewey. Well, yes. I said. Of course, I couldn't explain to him that it was likely to exist because we were living in a game. As I struggled for words, Sora came in to help. It may only be a rumor, but so what? The book we got from the professor is a fairy tale for kids, and we're still using that as a hint, he said. Both Dewey and I looked surprised. What are you getting surprised about? He asked me. He probably thought I should have realized that from the beginning, which I had, but I hadn't given it any deeper thought than that. Sora looked at me with an expression between disappointment and despair and went on talking. Just because it's a rumor doesn't mean there's no truth behind it. The book we got from the professor is evidence of that. So the rumor about the Forbidden Library could also be based on a real place. Oh, that's impressive. Sora wasn't brainy in the same way as someone like, say, Dewey, but he was smart in his own way. I agree. We should ask Mr. Lanchester about it, said Maria, who, unlike me and Dewey, didn't seem to be surprised by Sora's words. She had a determined look on her face. And so, we took a break from reading through the books and went to ask Cyrus about the Forbidden Library. Luckily he had just finished one of the tasks he was working on, and he happened to have the time to come with us to the meeting room to listen. Unfortunately, I've never heard about that, he said, looking troubled. I know that there are many strange rumors around the ministry. But I don't really involve myself in anything that isn't directly related to my work, so. I'd forgotten about it after his confession on the vegetable field, but Cyrus wasn't really the type to talk about things other than work. It was no surprise that he wouldn't know about rumors. We would probably have better luck asking Lorna Smith about it. I don't know whether she's there, but I'll try going to the magical tool laboratory, he said as he made to leave. But we couldn't ask our boss to do that, especially considering how busy he was. Lorna worked in the same department as Sora and me, so we offered to go look for her ourselves. With that, it was decided that I would be the one to go, so that Sora, who was better at that kind of thing, could report on our progress on the ancient books. When I opened the door to my department's office for the first time in a few days, I was met with the sight of my colleagues looking dangerously tired. "Are you people okay?" I asked while standing at the door. When they noticed me, one of them raised his voice until he was basically screaming. "Lady Clays! Is your special mission finished?" "And not yet," I stammered. Disappointed, he collapsed onto his desk. I was still looking at him, trying to understand what was going on, when Laura walked towards me. She asked me the same question and, upon hearing my negative answer, reacted with just as much disappointment as her colleague. "Excuse me, but what is happening here?" I asked her. Miss Lorna disappeared again. And what do you know, just as she did that, we were hit by an avalanche of documents that need our attention. As a result, everyone is so overworked. If that special mission ended, Miss Lorna wouldn't leave the office as much," she said, staring into the void. My earlier hope that Lorna might learn to be responsible by seeing Cyrus's example was dashed. Since I couldn't find her, all I could do was go back and report that to Cyrus. A newcomer like me wouldn't be able to help my colleagues with the paperwork anyway. I'd just be a nuisance. "I'm sorry I can't be of help." "I'll be going," I apologized. "Don't worry, I know you have other duties to attend to." "But why did you come here in the first place? Didn't you need something?" Laura asked. Despite being so tired from work, she was still thinking about me. I was lucky to have colleagues like her. I wanted to ask Miss Lorna about one of the ministry's myths, but since she isn't here, it doesn't really matter. "The ministry's myths? You mean one of those rumors about the place?" she asked, surprised. "Yes. Why, do you happen to know anything about those?" "Not really. I don't care much for myths. But I know someone who does," she said, then told me the name and department of that person. "It's not too late. You should be able to see her if you go right now." I thanked Laura for her help and hurried to the department she had told me about. The workday was almost over, but I wanted to ask her about the library today if I could. The sooner we found the Covenant, the sooner Lorna would be back at the office, and the sooner my colleagues would get some help with all of their work. I was running so fast that I reached my goal in no time. I took a deep breath, looking at the plate on the door that read Biomagic Research Department. I'd visited this place a few times so far and regretted it every single time. If the director caught me, he probably wouldn't let me go for quite a while. I knocked very lightly on the door before opening it, hoping not to be found by either Delius or that wretched monkey. The serious-looking woman standing right next to the entrance looked at me with some surprise. "Oh, you're the girl from before." "Before?" I repeated. She looked somewhat familiar, but I couldn't recall where I'd met her. Seeing my confusion, she laughed dryly. I'm sorry that our director and his monkey caused you so much trouble back then, and then again not much later. You're the one who came to visit me after I lost consciousness and then helped me a few days ago. She was the woman who dragged Delius to me to make him apologize. And then, she saved me when he was bothering me in front of his department. She smiled and nodded, confirming my hypothesis. Thank you for all of your help, and also for your present when you visited me after I lost consciousness, I said, referring to the snacks she had brought me while scolding Delius and the monkey. Don't mention it. It was all our fault to begin with, she said. Seeing her apologize again made me feel for her. She wasn't to blame for anything, yet she had to deal with all the problems caused by her director and his monkey. Thinking about it, I got nervous at the idea that the monkey could appear again out of nowhere. Don't worry, she said, noticing that I was looking around. The director is at a meeting today, and the monkey is in its cage. I let out a sigh of relief, which made her laugh. Anyway, can I help you with anything? She asked. I said that Laura had told me that a certain Alice from this department could help me with my search. Oh, that girl, sure, I'll call her here for you. Just wait, she said with a troubled expression. Why did she react like that? I've got a bad feeling about this. She came back, followed by a girl so beautiful that she looked like a doll. Since she was probably older than me, I should have thought of her as a woman rather than a girl, but she was so short and cute that she looked younger. Interestingly, her get-up also made her look like a friend of Laura's. She hadn't changed her uniform drastically, but she had adorned it with several small ribbons, similar to the big one she had on her head. Her face was covered in meticulously applied makeup, and her nails were painted cute colors. She was treading the fine line between acceptable and unacceptable work attire, unlike Laura, who had crossed the line by so much that she'd probably lost sight of it. I'm Alice. What do you want? She asked me as I was staring at her. Her voice was much colder than I'd expected from her lovely appearance. Oh, yes, I'm Katarina Clays from the Magical Tool Laboratory. Miss Laura told me that you were knowledgeable about the Ministry's myths, and I wanted to ask some questions about them, I said, and her eyes immediately started sparkling. Are you interested in the wonderful legends surrounding the Ministry? Well, I need to learn about them for work. Oh, I see, work. So, what do you want to know? I'll answer all your questions, she said, still looking at me with sparkling eyes and completely forgetting that I had mentioned work. I was happy that she'd help me, but her eyes reminded me of Delius's when he was talking about animals. I told her that, rather than listening to her by myself, it'd be better if she could come to the meeting room and talk in front of everyone. Vice Director, my work for today is done, so I'll go with this girl. She said she wants to learn about the Ministry's myths, so I just have to help her, she said to the woman I'd been talking to before. Who I now realized was the Vice Director of the Biomagic Research Department. Okay, she said, looking concerned, but try not to bother anyone. Me? Bother anyone? I'm going to help them. They're going to be grateful, if anything. Alice replied, pouting. The Vice Director saw us off silently. Her expression told me that I was in for some trouble, but I was glad that I could at least find someone to ask about the Forbidden Library. Everyone in the meeting room looked confused when I walked in with Alice, so I explained what had happened. You've got quite the dream team here. Alice murmured to herself. After all, we had Cyrus, the director of the most popular department, and Maria and Dewey, who were known throughout the ministry as two of the most promising newcomers. So, Alice then said to all of us, her attitude unchanged despite being in front of Cyrus, which myth do you want to hear about? I know around 30 of them. There are that many. I thought that there would be 7, like the stereotypical 7 myths circulating in all the schools of my old world. Of course the ministry is large and has a long history. Some are similar to each other, though, like the ones about the screaming voices one can hear at night, which... Thank you, but we don't really care about that. What we want to know about is the library, said Cyrus, stopping Alice before she could start her enthusiastic lecture. She looked a bit displeased, as she obviously wanted to tell us about those stories. Nevertheless, she obliged. There's the one about the cursed book that kills everybody who opens it after a few days, or the one about the invisible librarian who wanders through the library at night. That's not quite it I mean, those sound scary, but I don't even like horror stories. That thing about the invisible librarian is enough to make me determined to never go to the library at night ever again. Cyrus, unlike me, seemed completely unfazed. That's not what we're looking for. We're interested in something called the Forbidden Library. Do you know anything about that? Oh, that one. Alice replied, and her glaring expression changed to one of boredom. Don't you know about it? Cyrus asked, again completely unfazed. Surely he's noticed how her expression changed, right? Of course I do, but it's very boring as far as stories go. Cyrus asked her to explain, and, despite being clearly disappointed, she did. It's a story so boring, in fact, that most people outside the library department probably don't even know about it. There's a special library that only a few select people can enter, that's it. And does it really exist? Cyrus asked, and Alice grinned. That I don't know. It's a very old story, so it could be true, but it could also just be a rumor. I see. You said that the people in the library department know about this. Do you think there's someone in there who could tell us more? I doubt it. You'd probably only hear what I just told you. I like researching myths, even the boring ones, so I already asked all the librarians about it. She really was serious when it came to myths. So we can't get any hints about it. Cyrus said sadly. Well, maybe the library department director could tell you something more, Alice said after thinking for a while. As everyone looked at her excitedly at hearing that, she started looking a bit troubled. I can't make any promises though. When I went to ask about it, all the answers I got were so roundabout that I thought that there was something being hidden there. I didn't learn anything new, though, so I just gave up. But maybe you'll have more luck than I did. That was exactly what we wanted to hear, so we decided that the next day we'd be going to the director to ask about the Forbidden Library. Thank you for your help, Cyrus told Alice. I was so excited about being able to talk about the ministry's myths after so long, but you only asked me about one of them, she said, puffing up her cheeks in disappointment. But we heard what we wanted, so that's... Cyrus started to say, confused. But I want to tell you more, said Alice. The bad feeling I'd got looking at the vice-director's expression had now been justified. Alice was a very peculiar girl. I realized that she wouldn't be satisfied until we listened to her, and I was the one who had brought her here, so I spoke up. Tell me more, then. I'll listen, I told her. Cyrus looked disconcerted, but Alice was smiling enthusiastically. The former went back to his department to finish his work, while the latter stayed with me, Maria, Dewey, and Sora to tell us more scary and mysterious stories about the ministry. Before long, I regretted offering to listen to her. She kept talking and talking well after our workday was over and until the sun had completely set. Eventually, Cyrus had to come back and rescue us. Plus, for a few days after that, I couldn't walk to the toilet alone at night. The next day, the whole Covenant search party met in the conference room. Even Larna, who had been missing in action for a while, finally showed up at the ministry and was dragged along by Cyrus. He filled her in about the Forbidden Library, since she wasn't there to hear about it the day before. One of the ministry's myths? That could be an interesting lead, she said after listening to Cyrus's explanation. Are you knowledgeable about that kind of thing? I asked her. Well, not as much as Miss Alice, but I do know about a couple of them. For example, there's one about the screams that you can hear in the middle of the... Please, we've heard more than enough about that, I promptly interrupted her. After what had happened the previous day, any mention of the scary myths surrounding the ministry gave me chills. Everyone knows how obsessed Miss Alice is with that kind of thing. She's a weird one, isn't she? Larna said, grinning wryly. Yes. She told us about a bunch of terrifying stories, I said with a pained expression. With that, Larna started telling us more about Alice. As it turned out, she was well known throughout the ministry for being obsessed with weird and terrifying stories, such as the ministry's myths. What's more, she knew no greater happiness than retelling these tales to other people. In one word, she was weird. If only I'd known about that, I could have avoided having to sit through her stories. Larna noticed the sadness on my face, and in a backhanded attempt to comfort me, said, "Don't beat yourself up though, all newcomers fall for it the first time." The conversation finally steered away from Alice. Anyway, this is the first time I've heard about the Forbidden Library, Larna said. It seems that, for the most part, only people in the library department know about it, and they generally consider it to be a baseless rumor, Cyrus said. Of course they don't care for myths and fables. Most people in that department are straight-laced realists, Larna commented. And I remembered the librarian who had laughed at the idea of the Forbidden Library. She had been the one to mention it, and yet had quickly dismissed it as nothing more than a rumor. However, Cyrus said, it seems that the library department's director tries to avoid questions about it, so it's possible that there's something more to find there. Larna's pupils widened a little. You expect me to believe that Dorand, that prissy coward, knows anything about myths? Please. It seemed that Dorand was the name of the library department's director. That would definitely be unlike him, Cyrus replied, but I thought that it would still be worth the effort, so I went ahead and contacted him. He said he would be free in the afternoon today. Cyrus really worked fast. You really work fast, hey, said Larna, apparently thinking the same thing as me. If that's the case, let's go meet him later today, she continued. What? You plan on coming too? Cyrus asked, confused and clearly disappointed. Of course. You're a talented guy, Cyrus Lanchester, but I'm better at getting information out of people, Larna said, ignoring Cyrus's clear chagrin. Fine, he said, restraining himself from saying anything else with what looked like a considerable effort. Larna nodded, and then said, good. Then you, I, and Katarina will go. Wait, why should I go? I asked. Surely Cyrus and Larna would be enough on their own? The fact that you're Duke Clay's daughter is known throughout the ministry. We can leverage your rank's influence to pressure Dorand into talking. Don't worry, You won't need to do anything. You can just sit there and listen. Did you just say pressure him into talking? I asked, feeling like I had just heard something pretty shady. If he doesn't want to talk about it, then we need to compel him somehow, right? So we either need some information to offer him in return, some weakness of his to blackmail him with, or influence to coerce him, she said. Sounding like a much better villainess than I could ever aspire to be. Much to my dismay, since I wanted to go back to delivering packages as soon as possible, it was decided that we would keep looking through books until the afternoon. After several unsurprisingly fruitless hours of labor, it was time to meet with the library department's director. And Cyrus and Larna made me follow them into an office where the director was already waiting for us. I looked at him, with his business haircut, black-rimmed glasses, scrawny physique, and generally tense demeanor, and I felt that Larna's assessment of him as a prissy coward was pretty apt. "Thank you for having us," Cyrus said. "Why, I don't mind at all," Dorand replied, with an expression on his face that said that he did mind, and quite a lot at that. After Cyrus and Larna, it was my turn to greet him and introduce myself, at which point Dorand was visibly shaken. Larna had already told me that he came from the family of a not particularly wealthy viscount, which made the title of Duke all the more impressive to him. I'd already met several peculiar department directors at the ministry, but none quite like him. Larna, peculiar department director extraordinaire, started talking to Dorand, whose face had become even more tense. "We want to know about the Forbidden Library," she said without mercy. "Yes, I heard as much from Lanchester. I wonder why'd you go through the trouble of asking me about such a silly rumor," he said, trying and failing to sound nonchalant. "We're on a special mission straight from the higher-ups." "So, where's the Forbidden Library?" Larna asked, speaking as if she knew that what she was looking for did indeed exist. I was surprised by her boldness, but I just sat there in silence as instructed, waiting for the director's answer. "Larna, there is no such library. It's just a fairytale," he said after a short pause, visibly troubled. "As are most of the ministry's myths. You're wasting your time." "That's not the case," she said matter-of-factly. "Hey!" Dorand and I said in unison. Cyrus remained silent, but he also looked surprised. "There is no smoke without fire," she said, sounding pleased at our surprise. "Even myths have a basis in reality. Take the one about the nightly screams as an example. Tired employees, forced to deal with piled-up work without pause day and night, scream their anguish in the hallways. That's the truth that the myth is based upon." That was one of the stories that Alice had told us the previous day, and, while I was surprised to know that it was real, I was glad to know that the screams didn't belong to ghosts or whatever. "And that applies to most other stories in the ministry," she said, looking straight into Dorand's eyes. "So, where's the library?" "I'm sorry, but I don't know anything about it," he said, avoiding her stare. "That's a shame. In that case, give us permission to search the library on a day when it's not open to the public," she continued. That's," he said, fumbling for words, and Larna grinned. "What's the problem? We're just going to nose around a bit, especially directly under the library's floor," she said, making Dorand's eyes twitch with worry. "Is anything the matter?" she asked with an even larger grin. After staying silent for a while, the library department's director sighed. "How much do you know?" he asked. "Only as much as I just told you. We could break the entrance open, but it would probably be best for everyone if you just opened it for us." "Your information network is really impressive," he said, sighing again. Fine. I shall see you to the Forbidden Library. Very well. It seems that I won't even need to tell your wife that you secretly had lunch together with a young, pretty librarian, Lorna said, making Doran's face turn even more pale than it already was. In a perfect villainous move, she had also planned to blackmail him if necessary. In the end, we got the power to enter the Forbidden Library without either me or Cyrus having to do anything. I had a feeling that with this, we were one step closer to getting the Covenant. Doran told us that the other librarians didn't know about the Forbidden Library, so he would show us the entrance after everyone had finished their work for the day. Miss Lorna, how did you know that the Forbidden Library was underground? I asked while we were walking back to the meeting room. No? How would I know that? I just took a guess. What? I screamed, shocked at her reply. Cyrus had frozen in place too. I looked at the floor plans for the library, and they matched the actual dimensions. Remember that the ministry is full of smart people. If the plans were off, someone would notice. I figured that it could have stayed reasonably hidden all along if it were underground, so I just bluffed and pretended I knew all along. He was fooled so easily that I didn't even need to use any of my other strategies to get him to talk. What a waste, she said, disappointed. Lorna wasn't very serious about her job, and she was often scolded by her subordinates, especially Raphael. But listening to her now, I thought that maybe she was more talented than she let on. I also remembered that one of my department colleagues had told me that Lorna is easy on her allies, but merciless to her enemies. Doran wasn't exactly an enemy, but I still felt bad for him. We kept organizing all the information at our disposal until the workday was over, and then all 6 of us made for the library. There was no need for all of us to go there, but, maybe because the Forbidden Library was too interesting to pass on a chance to see it, I, for one, was pretty excited about it. Nobody offered to wait in the meeting room for the others to return. Doran was standing alone, looking grim, waiting for us. I thought only the 2 directors would be going inside, he said, sounding aghast. He obviously hadn't expected 6 people to show up. Is that a problem? Lorna asked, and he was immediately cowed. Well, it's a small room, so we'll just go in one by one. But it's very dusty, so it's not ideal for young boys or girls to go there, he said, looking at Maria and Dewey. We would not mind, the 2 said in sync, Maria looking fierce and Dewey looking offended. I was also offended by the fact that I didn't get so much as a glance when girls were mentioned, but Sora patted my shoulder and told me not to think too much about it. I see, Doran said with a defeated sigh. Come along, then. We followed him to the ancient book corner, and then he stepped behind a bookcase, probably to press some kind of switch. We heard a click and, after a moment, the bookcase started moving slowly and loudly. After almost a minute, the movement stopped and a staircase leading underground was revealed to us. There sure are a lot of hidden rooms in this world. I wonder if it's trendy or something. Back in that mansion we entered when I was still at the academy, we found what we were looking for after discovering the hidden room, so I'm sure the same will happen this time too. Covenant, here we come. This way, Doran said, stepping onto the staircase, and we followed him. I wondered why he'd let us all come in at once despite saying that the room was small, but once we were inside, I realized that there was actually plenty of room. The room was large, and full of shelves that were stacked with books. It was about as big as the library we called it that even though it was basically just a room with several books in it in the town where I used to live before I was reincarnated. I also thought that there must have been some magic at work over the place, because, despite being underground, it was tidy and well lit. It was incredible that such a place could be hidden under the library without anyone noticing. "This is incredible," said Maria, unable to contain her awe. "They call it the Forbidden Library, but as you can see, it's just a perfectly normal collection of books." "Now that you've all seen it, we can go back," Doran said while we were still gazing at the room around us. "What? We just got here, and we still haven't had time to look for the Covenant," I thought, and Lorna gave voice to my complaints. "No, we still need to search it. We came here to look for a book, and we can't leave until we know whether or not it's in here," she said. "And what book would that be?" asked Doran, with an annoyed expression on his face. "I can't tell you the details, but it's a book about lost magic," she replied, and he sighed yet again. "You could have told me that earlier. There's no book about lost magic in here. You'd better search elsewhere." "Wait," said Lorna. Now she was the one with a worried expression, for once. "You mean you know the content of all the books kept in here?" "I haven't read all of them, but I at least know what kind of books they are. So I can tell you that the book on lost magic that you're looking for is not here. But we do not know much about the book that we are looking for. Please let us check, even just for a bit," said Maria with a determined look in her eyes. When asked by a pretty young girl, Doran couldn't just refuse her as coldly as he had Lorna. "Well, but," he said, blushing and mumbling. While he was still coming up with an appropriate response, our trusty Lorna had already walked to the shelves and was now flipping through the pages of a book. "Oh, would you look at this?" she said to herself, sounding interested. Doran, upon hearing that, ran over to her and snatched the book out of her hands. "Why, you've seen it, right? All the books in here are of the same kind as this one. So now you know that the book you are looking for is not in here," he said, sounding extremely nervous and looking dangerously red in the face. "What do you mean?" Cyrus asked. Lorna, grinning, took another book and handed it to him, telling him to take a look. As soon as he opened the book, Cyrus blushed. "Doran, explain this. Why are books such as this kept inside the sacred library of the ministry?" he asked with the book still in his hand. "That's why I keep them hidden in here," Doran replied, pulling at his own hair. "I see, but why are you keeping them in the first place? And you don't mean to tell me that all of these books are like this one, do you?" "They are," he replied, grimacing. "Every last one of them. This is unbelievable. But why? Who would do this? Generations of library directors have collected them, little by little, as cultural artifacts. There's something wrong with the library department." I, myself, was shocked at first. The previous director brought me here and showed me these books, saying that they'd been passed down from one director to the next. What could I do? Cyrus and Doran were talking fervently, but I still had no idea what was going on. I looked at Lorna for an explanation. "The only thing these books tell us is what fetishes the library directors of old were into. These are erotic books," she said casually. "Lorna, please, couldn't you choose your words better?" asked Doran, who was gnashing his teeth. "Erotic books. All of them?" I blurted out loudly in surprise. "That's not something a noble lady should say out loud," Sora commented, "but how could I help it? Who wouldn't be surprised at this huge room being completely full of erotic books?" Lorna laughed at my surprise. "At least that's what Doran says," and all the ones I've seen so far fall into that category. Some of them with just text, some with illustrations, some about love affairs, some about stealing lovers, and oh, this one's about two men, she said after looking at one of the books near her. There are even boys' love books. Sophia would be thrilled. Lately, she's been getting bored with normal romance and has started getting interested in that genre. I was listening to Lorna with utmost interest, but Cyrus, as strict as always, scolded her. Lorna, mind what you say around women. A place so full of despicable materials is bound to be bad for the body and the spirit. Maria, Katerina, get out of here. I didn't see how it could be bad for the body, but he sounded dead serious. I'd read a lot of romance novels in my time, but nothing that was straight out erotic. Dewey, considering his age and upbringing, probably hadn't either. Sora, our most respectable older colleague, probably had first-hand, non-fictional experience with that kind of stuff. But as for Maria, I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't even know about the existence of books like these. All in all, it was probably better for us to leave. But the Covenant could be hidden among these other books, Maria said, refusing to go. It was an unexpected comment from the most unexpected source. But Maria, the books in here are not appropriate for you, Cyrus said, looking worried as he tried to convince her, but she looked like she wasn't going to give in any time soon. Had Sora said the same thing, I'd have thought that he just wanted to look at the naughty books, but it was obvious that Maria had no such ulterior motive. She really wanted to find the Covenant. When I had first heard about the Forbidden Library, I had gotten a weird, inexplicable feeling that the Covenant would be hidden here. Maybe Maria had felt something similar, which was why she was so intent on searching the place before giving up. One would think that a place called the Forbidden Library would hold valuable ancient magic books or tomes full of dangerous spells, but erotic books? I could see why they'd want to hide them, but why go through the trouble of building this underground room? Was the idea born out of the same instincts that compelled boys to hide adult magazines under their beds? And anyway, why was this place so big? I couldn't believe that they'd have built this room specifically for erotic books. I mean, if they really had, that would be impressive in its own right. Lorna, who had been thinking something similar, spoke up. When was this place even built? I doubt that it was conceived as an erotic library to begin with. I'm afraid that it was built specifically as an erotic library, right alongside the main library. The wife of the first library director was a very jealous woman, who wouldn't forgive her husband if he kept as much as a single erotic book. She told him to throw away all the ones that he had collected before marriage, but he only pretended to do so, and hid them inside his mansion. However, she eventually found them, and the director, who had no better place to hide them, had this room added to the library, which was then under construction. This is what I've been told, Dorand explained slowly, as if he were narrating an epic tale, probably unaware of the fact that he had just called it an erotic library himself. That's incredible, said Lorna, stupefied. But does this mean that all of the books here were his? That would be a ridiculous amount for a single person, and some of them are more recent than others. Some of them are, but several of the men who succeeded him added their own so that their wives wouldn't find them. Some directors even added to the collection after they retired, which is why there are so many, he explained, looking extremely tired. This great erotic collection must have come with great responsibility. That explains it, but that would also mean that the books just keep piling up. Indeed. Which is why every once in a while I throw out ones that have become too old or worn out. I mix them in with other trash from the ministry so nobody finds out. Having to do that while also making sure that nobody sees these books must have been a tiresome task. I can't put my finger on it, but something sounded off just now. That must be tough, said Lorna, sympathizing with Dorand as he let out a deep sigh. It is. It's a very troublesome duty, he said. Then, looking at all of us, he continued, so please keep this a secret. If those strict colleagues of mine knew that I was looking after this place, they'd all start looking down on me. And my wife, while lovely, can't stand this kind of thing. She could even divorce me if she found me going in and out of a place like this. Please, please don't tell anyone about it. He looked so intense in his plea that we all nodded gravely. Thank you, he said with tears in his eyes. And so, since the director insisted that there were only erotic books in the library, and since Lorna, Cyrus, and Sora all checked for themselves and found the same thing, we all went back upstairs. I had been positive that we would find the Covenant in the underground library, but now we were back to square one. We'd also already checked most of the ancient books in the library, which made me think that maybe the Covenant wasn't in the Ministry at all. Which was weird, considering that this was, without a doubt, the largest library in the kingdom. Wait a second, what was that thing that sounded so off before? Isn't there any place in the Ministry, besides the library, where ancient books are kept? Maria asked Dorand while I was still thinking to myself. I'm sorry, but there isn't, at least not that I know of. That was inevitable. If it wasn't among the other ancient books, it couldn't be anywhere else. Earlier, he'd also said that the old erotic books were being thrown out, so wait. Of course. Mr. Dorand. You said that you throw out those erotic books when they're too old and can't be read anymore. But does that also apply to the other books in the library? I asked so enthusiastically that he was surprised. Yes. We see if they can be repaired, and if they cannot, and it is judged that they do not hold particular value, we get rid of them. This meant that even if the Covenant really had been here, it could have been thrown away because it was too worn out. That hadn't occurred to me at all until then. And what do you do when you throw them out? Burn them? I asked, fearing the worst. I don't actually know. We throw them away, but other people take care of it from there. And who are these other people? The Magical Tool Laboratory, he said, and I turned back to look at Lorna, who was grinning. When we get the books to be thrown out, we don't get rid of them straight away, just in case there's a useful one amongst them. Except for the ones that were given to us a long time ago, they should all still be in a warehouse within the Ministry. So there was another place besides the library where we could look for books. I looked at Maria, who looked back at me and nodded. Miss Lorna, please show us that warehouse. I said. Yes, please. Maria echoed. Since this all started in a garden that's kept tidy by magic, I assumed that the book would stay in mint condition as well, so I didn't even consider looking at the discarded books. It might be worth our while to check though, Lorna mused. Then she smiled at the enthusiastic Maria. I'd tell you to wait until tomorrow, but you don't seem able to wait any longer. I'll show you the place, but you're not allowed to keep searching until late at night, she said, and then guided us to the warehouse. The Covenant, which I had almost given up on finding, now seemed to be within reach again, even if the chance of actually finding it was still minuscule. I really hoped that it would be somewhere in that warehouse. The large warehouse, used for storing things that didn't immediately need to be on hand, wasn't far from the Magical Tool Laboratory office. Lorna unlocked the door and we all entered. The place was a bit dusty, possibly because people didn't go there often after all, nothing that people would normally want was stored here. It looked huge from the outside, but when we went inside, I saw that it was so full of stuff that it actually had very little free space left. I think books were over here," said Larna, starting to walk forward. If she hadn't been there with us, finding the place where the books were being kept would have been a feat all on its own. "Oh, here they are," she said, pointing to a bunch of books. Literally a bunch, since they weren't neatly stacked on shelves like in the library, but just lying around in piles on the floor. There were so many that they could fill a small library room. "Looking through these won't be easy," I said to myself. "Of course," said Larna, who had heard me. "They're all piled up at random, and you need to move all the ones on top before you can even see the ones on the bottom. This will take a while, so let's start after the weekend." We had the next 2 days off, so it made sense to rest and start searching on Monday. I was nodding at Larna when I noticed Maria walking towards the books by herself and then stopping in front of them. "Maria." She removed a few books from a pile and then took one of them in her hands. This was so sudden that we were all staring at her in confusion. "Maria? What are you doing?" I asked her. "I have finally found it," she said with a smile. "Found it? You can't possibly mean?" I stared at the book she was holding. It was a dusty, old book with a cover which had lost almost all of its original color. "Yes. This is the Covenant," she said, shocking everyone. "What? The Covenant? For real? How can she even tell?" "Maria, how can you be sure that that is the Covenant? And why did you go straight for that one in the first place?" It was Larna who asked this, but everyone else was probably thinking the exact same questions. I am not sure of the reason, but I just realized it as soon as I saw that pile of books. "This is the one that I have been looking for," she replied, with a stare so intense that nobody could doubt her words. Regardless, anyone who knew her also knew that she never lied anyway. The protagonist of that fairy tale was able to tell that he had found the Covenant as soon as he saw it, but could such a thing really work in reality? "Do you mind showing that book to me?" Larna asked. She took the book from Maria's hands and opened it. "This is," she said, staring at the book's contents. "What is it? Is it a book on incredible, unmatched magic powers?" I was leaning forward, hanging on Larna's every word. "An introductory book on basic magic." "Wait. But why?" I found myself screaming. The whole thing made no sense anymore. How am I supposed to know why? "I'm just telling you what I see." "Look for yourself," Larna said, handing me the book, which was full of ancient script, of course. "I'm sorry, I can't read this," I said, giving up immediately. "Oh, right," Larna said, and then explained that it described very basic magic that academy students learned at the start of their first year. Since all the other people around could read the book unlike me, they all took turns looking at it and then asking Maria the same kinds of questions. "Are you sure that this is the Covenant?" "Yes. I am positive. But why does it only talk about basic magic?" "That could be on purpose, so that people cannot tell what it is really about. It's no wonder that they wanted to throw it out, since it only describes basic stuff and it's this battered." Once again, I felt sad about being left out of the conversation because of my ignorance. Maybe I should go back to studying ancient script. Like, right now, I thought to myself, and took the top book from the pile closest to me. It looked as worn out as the one that Maria had found, and inside it were tons of difficult letters which I didn't understand. I quickly realized that kind of study wasn't for me. Looking at difficult script made me sleepy. I wished that Larna would build a magical tool to automatically translate books. Well, it seems we achieved our goal here, so let's go home. It's quite late already, Larna said, and only then did I realize how late it had gotten. Let's get out of this dusty warehouse, she said, and I quickly followed her, amused by the fact that she also thought it was dusty. Once we were all out of the warehouse and ready to go home for the day, Larna said, as soon as the weekend is over, let's bring that covenant to the garden. Actually, I would like to go tomorrow. I can go by myself, if you give me permission, Maria said timidly. Maria, we know next to nothing about this lost magic, and we can't tell what could happen. We can't have you go there by yourself, Larna replied, and Maria nodded sadly. But I get that you want to try out that magic as soon as possible. If it were me, I'd go right now. But I wasn't able to get inside the rock by myself, Larna continued. Larna, when did you even try that? Asked Cyrus, suspicious. As soon as I heard about the garden. How could I resist trying out a type of magic as rare as that? But unfortunately, it didn't work. Judging from what Maria and Katarina said, and what was written in that fairy tale, I think that only light magic users can enter the rock. Cyrus put a hand on his forehead. The fact that Larna had tried to enter the secret dimension inside the rock wasn't really surprising. So, as I said, I understand why you'd want to try it out as soon as possible. Tomorrow we have no work, and I'm free, so free, in fact, that I may just so happen to take a stroll through the ministry to kill the time, she said, grinning like a child. And Maria's face instantly lit up with happiness. Thank you, she said with a bow. What are they talking about? I think I'm missing something here, I thought, and I looked at Sora, hoping for an explanation. What she means is that she can't do it officially, but she can go with Maria to try out the covenant as long as they keep it a private thing, Sora, who had immediately realized what I wanted to ask him, whispered. So tomorrow Maria is going to go back to that dimension with the covenant? I'm also free tomorrow. Please let me come, I said. I'd been helping Maria in her search all along, so I wanted to see Maria as she got her new awesome light magic upgrade. Larna, if Maria and Miss Katarina are going, then I'll go too, just to be safe, Cyrus said, and was soon followed by Dewey and Sora. Eventually, it was decided that, on the next day, we would all go to the Lost Magic Garden together. After we decided on a time to meet, the workday was finally over, and I went home. We finally found it, I said to myself while stretching my tired body on my bed. But I never thought it'd be in one of the magical tool laboratory warehouses all along. After all the trouble we'd been through, it was inside a place owned by my department. It had been right under our noses the whole time. I remembered what Jedward had said a few days ago, and realized that he was right. My fiancé was really incredible. I took off my uniform and threw my bag onto the desk. If Anne were there, she would have scolded me for not walking to the desk and gently placing it there, but I was alone, so it didn't matter. The bag landed perfectly where I wanted it to, thanks to years of practicing the art of throwing toy snakes. Unfortunately, however, the bag opened and all of its contents spilled out. I should have walked to the desk like a good girl, I thought while picking up my stuff from the floor, and wait, what's this? It was the book I had tried to read in the warehouse. Larna had hurried us out of the place, so I had mindlessly put it in my bag and ended up bringing it home. Ah, why did I do that? At least it was a book from the warehouse, so it wasn't like anyone was going to need it anytime soon. I could just put it in my bag and bring it back to the ministry the next day. I heard a light knock on the door, and when I asked who it was, Keith replied. "Oh, you aren't sleeping yet today. May I talk to you for a while?" "Of course. Come in," I said. He opened the door a crack and peeked his head inside, but he just shook his head while looking preoccupied. "No, not this late at night. I see you still aren't heeding my warnings, not that it surprises me," he said sadly. "But anyway, you have work off tomorrow. Do you want to go out somewhere together?" As he asked me this, every trace of sadness on his face disappeared. Unfortunately, I had to go to the ministry tomorrow despite the fact that I had no work. I explained that to him, and he started looking slightly irritated. "Weren't you supposed to only work a few days each week, and only a few hours each day?" "Father doesn't seem to care, but I think that you're working too much for a girl of your lineage." Indeed, I'd meant to join the ministry part-time at first, but since I was having trouble learning about everything I needed to do, I realized that I needed to work more hours if I didn't want to be left behind. That was why I had personally asked to work as much as the other newcomers. Mother agreed with me, saying, "You would probably make less trouble working by yourself than by becoming someone's wife," so I was now working full-time. Furthermore, because of the search for the covenant, I'd been coming home late for the past few days. I looked at Keith and his irritated face, with the cheeks slightly puffed up. He looked manlier than he had when we'd first met, but he still reminded me of his young, childish self. "Big sister, Prince Jedward will be here tomorrow. Let's leave before he does," he would tell me, puffing up his cheeks like he was doing now. Now that I thought about it, I hadn't given Keith any attention lately. I stretched my hand and put it on his head as he was still standing right outside my room. I used to be able to stroke his flaxen hair so easily, but now he had become so tall that it took some effort. "I'll be back home early tomorrow, so let's go out to play together when I get back," I said, running my hand over his head. "You're always so," he murmured, but his voice was so feeble that I didn't hear. "What?" I asked, stepping closer to him, but he stepped away from me. "Thank you. Good night," he said, practically running away and leaving me no chance to say him good night back. As he was walking away, I heard him chant a sort of prayer, "Restraint. Restraint. Restraint." I wonder what that's supposed to mean. It was also then that I remembered that Jedward had invited me for sweets on my next day off, and that I would need to tell Keith about that. But as soon as he left, I immediately got sleepy and quickly departed for the wonderful world of dreams, forgetting all about it. Chapter 6, A New Power. When I reached the ministry the next day, Lorna greeted me with a shocked expression. "Miss Katarina, why did you bring your brother with you?" she asked, looking at Keith, who was standing by my side. When I told him that it wouldn't take me that long, he insisted on tagging along. I was planning to go out to spend time with him after coming back from the ministry, but he said that if it wasn't going to take me that long then he might as well come with me. I tried to talk him out of it, but I never stood a chance at winning against him in a debate, so he ended up coming to the ministry. I was embarrassed at being accompanied by my brother, but he didn't seem to either notice or care. "I shall not bother you while you work. I will wait quietly by the side as you perform your tasks," he said. "In that case, please wait in the guest room until we're done," Lorna said. Eventually Cyrus, Maria, Dewey, and Sora showed up. Leaving Keith behind, we all went to the garden where we'd first found out about the lost magic. "Your brother must be worried about you," said Sora, who was walking alongside me as he always did during work. Worried about what? I asked. Now that I was a working woman, I thought that I was able to handle myself just fine. Exactly, he said mockingly, refusing to explain himself any further. We then reached the garden and approached the magic stone, taking a path that didn't go through Cyrus's field so that nobody would notice it. Is this the one? It just looks like an ordinary stone to me, said Dewey, sounding confused. This was his first time seeing it. Good. Now, let's try activating it. Lorna said excitedly as soon as we were there. Calm down. Shouldn't we check it more carefully before we do that? Cyrus said, sporting the stern expression that he seemed to reserve exclusively for Lorna. Don't worry, I've already checked it thoroughly, she said, implying that she'd already investigated the place when she was here without us. This white rock is probably a switch of sorts. The last time the stone was activated, Katarina was touching this rock while Maria used light magic on her, right? Yes, Maria replied. I've been thinking about it, and, taking into consideration other magic activation conditions, I've reached the conclusion that when light magic flows into the stone, the lost magic is activated. Summoning the user into another dimension, Lorna explained as she stretched her hand towards Maria. Let's test my hypothesis. Maria, place a hand on that stone and use your light magic. Yes. Maria said, taking Lorna's hand and walking towards the stone. Wait a second, why are you holding Maria's hand? Cyrus asked Lorna. I just want to go to that other dimension together with Maria. Katarina was transported together with her, and I'm sure that this was because she was touching her at the time. I agree that that's probably the reason, but I'm not so sure Maria will be safe going together with you. I'll come along as well, Cyrus said. However, since Maria already had one hand on the stone and the other hand inside Lorna's, he stopped, unsure what to do. It probably doesn't matter what part of her body you're touching. Just grab her somewhere, Lorna said. Grab her somewhere, said Cyrus, blushing and freezing still. He had become able to talk with Maria, but touching a young girl and one he liked, at that was probably still a bit too much for him. You still have so much to learn, I thought, feeling like an old woman looking at her grandson, but apparently his hesitation was not as well received by Lorna. What are you waiting for? She asked, before releasing Maria's hand, grabbing her arm instead, and then pulling Cyrus's hand onto Maria's. Maria, do it, she ordered enthusiastically. Why yes, Maria replied, activating her magic. Light started flowing out of the hand that she had placed onto the stone, and then Maria, together with an excited Lorna and a blushing Cyrus, disappeared. It really worked. The three of us left were awed at what had just happened. I knew this was supposed to happen, but damn, they really disappeared. I gotta admit that I'm surprised, Sora said, looking shocked. That can only be described as disappearing into nothingness, said Dewey, who sounded thrilled about it. I was together with Maria last time, so I didn't know how it'd look from the outside, I murmured, impressed. Lorna was talking about another dimension, but I wondered where they had gone to. I walked closer to the stone and took a good look at it. Except for the white sparkly rock coming out of it, it had nothing out of the ordinary. That other dimension couldn't be inside the stone itself, could it? It was a big stone, but not that big. Curious, I tried going around it and knocking on it. Stay still and wait until Maria and the two directors return. It could be dangerous, Sora said as I was circling the stone. Lately Sora was always scolding me, and he was starting to sound like Keith. Don't worry, I'm just looking, I said, but I knew that Sora would get mad at me if I spent too much time loitering near the stone. Before leaving it alone, I tried to put my ear on it, exactly behind where the white rock was on the front, to see if I could hear any sound coming from the inside. Out of nowhere, Poki stuck his head out of my shadow and barked. "Poki! You know that you're not supposed to leave my shad," I started saying, when all of a sudden I couldn't see anything anymore. "What is going on?" I thought, confused. I blinked repeatedly until I finally saw my body, but nothing else. I was inside a large empty space, with nothing but pitch-black darkness all around. I got a feeling of déjà vu. Something just like this had happened to me recently. Oh, yeah. The other dimension that I was teleported to together with Maria. That other dimension was white and blindingly full of light, but this one was full of darkness. Light and dark, like two sides of the same coin, I thought to myself, and my vision went completely dark once again. When I was able to see again, I noticed a black orb in front of me. "Do you long for greater powers?" the orb asked with a chillingly cold voice. That wasn't the first time I'd heard that phrase. Maria had gone into the light dimension, which meant that I was probably in the dark, evil one. Not a good place to be in. To be honest, I liked Poki as it was now, and I didn't really want any more power. The last thing I want happening is to get incredible dark powers and turn into a bona fide villainess headed for doom. I'll just be honest with the orb guy. I don't long for power, I meant to say, but before I could open my mouth, the orb spoke. "If you want greater powers, find the Covenant, and oh, I see that you already have the Covenant with you." "Excuse me? Covenant? I don't have that. I found a truly worthy candidate this time around." "You have the potential to engulf the whole world in darkness," the orb said. "Thank you, I guess, but I don't really want to do that." "What's up with this orb anyway? It just keeps talking and doesn't listen to a single thing I say." The light one was kind of condescending, but this one isn't any better. "Really? Very well. I shall impart all of my knowledge unto you." "Hey, I'm trying to say that." Before I could finish speaking, my bag, which was still hanging from my shoulder, started floating in mid-air. It then opened by itself, and a book came flying out of it. It was the same ancient script book that I'd accidentally brought back home with me the previous day from the warehouse. A black mist started coming out of it, and I understood what that book was: the Covenant of Darkness. And the most surprising thing was that it was all a coincidence, how I'd chosen that book, how I'd brought it back with me, and how I'd entered this dark dimension while it was still in my bag. The dark orb, oblivious to my shock, spoke again. "Take it." As soon as I heard those words, I saw a shower of black arrows coming out of nowhere and aiming for the floating book. Never-ending coils of black letters were raining down in front of my eyes. I felt dizzy, as if I had motion sickness, but the letters kept on pouring down, one after the other. "I can't take this." I lost consciousness in the midst of that black storm. Pink walls, a black table, a metal-framed bed with azure duvets and blue cushions. Oh, this is the familiar sight of Akin's bedroom. I must be having that dream again. This is a chance to take a look at FL2. Please, Akin, play the game. I need as much information about it as possible. Maybe my prayer reached her, because the TV, where the game was already on, entered my vision. The screen showed Cyrus, who had a troubled expression. "Yes. I'll be able to learn more. Thank you, Akin, my friend. There's no need for you to do anything that dangerous." "Let me protect you," Cyrus said, sounding melancholic and looking handsome. It looked like Akan had already succeeded in making him fall in love with the protagonist. What scene is this? I wondered while focusing on the screen, where Cyrus's line was followed by the protagonist's. I do not want to endanger you either, Mr. Cyrus. I will fight too. I want to do more than just be protected. That really sounded like something that Maria would say. I could easily imagine her, the strong and kind friend who I was so proud of, saying that in reality. Fine. Let's go then, Cyrus said, stretching his hand out to her. Since I hadn't been watching from the start, all I knew about this scene was that the two characters were in danger, and that they were going to fight against someone or something. The screen faded into the next scene, showing a robed girl with a hood over her head. In other words, it was FL2's antagonist and Villainess, Katarina Clays. Now that I have this new power, I'll finally be able to take my revenge on her, Katarina said with an evil laugh. A mysterious shadow, looking like a wolf, was standing behind her, and she had a black book in her hand. The person that Maria and Cyrus are going to fight against is Katarina. No way. And that thing behind her, is that Pokey? And that book, the one in her hand, is it? I jumped up, and the first thing I saw as soon as I opened my eyes was the white curtains surrounding my bed. Where am I? Why was I sleeping in here? Why was I even sleeping in the first place? Struggling with the pain of the strong headache I'd woken up with. I was trying to figure out how I'd gotten here when the curtain in front of me opened slightly and I saw two beautiful ruby-colored eyes look at me. Oh, you're awake. Sophia? Where is why? This is the Ministry's infirmary. I happen to be here to help with some work today, and you're here because you lost consciousness, she explained, having somehow understood my question. I'd heard that Sophia mainly helped out at the infirmary on the days when she came to work at the ministry. Today must have been one of those days. Thanks to her answer, my memories started coming back little by little. I remembered that I'd gone to that garden together with Maria and the others so that she could find the lost magic, and then... Big sister, how do you feel? Miss Katarina, are you okay? Lady Katarina, are you well? Keith, Larna, and Maria appeared one after the other through the curtains. Behind them I could see Cyrus, Sora, and Dewey, all looking worried. Did you find the lost magic already? I asked them, and Maria nodded with force. Yes. Thanks to the help of everyone here, I was able to obtain it. But when we came back, we found you lying unconscious on the other side of the stone. How are you feeling now? Ah, they found it. That's great news. And then they found me unconscious. Why? But why was I unconscious? I asked, struggling to remember, and Sora replied. When Miss Campbell and the two directors disappeared into the stone, you started walking around it to take a closer look. I tried stopping you, but you said not to worry. Then I could not hear your voice anymore, and when I went to check, you were not there anymore. I continued to look around, and eventually you reappeared behind the stone, unconscious, he explained, speaking as politely as he could. But I got the feeling that what he ultimately meant was, can't you learn to do as you are told just once in your life? Anyway, he said that I had disappeared and then reappeared just like Maria. It was then that I remembered a terrifying image, black letters pouring down from above, one after the other. Just thinking about it was enough to make my head spin, and I put both my palms against my temples. Was that reality, or was it just a dream? Lady Katarina, you are extremely pale. Do you need help? Maria asked while looking at my face with concern in her eyes. I just felt weird for a second, but I'm fine now. Say, did I have a book with me? I asked, wanting to make sure that what I had seen was real. Yes, it is right here. You were holding it when we found you, said Sophia, handing it to me. There was no doubt this was the very book that I'd brought back home with me the previous day. So the book was really there, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the book's content. If it was really full of those letters I'd seen back then. I slowly and cautiously opened the book, but the only thing on its pages was the same ancient script that I'd unsuccessfully tried to read in the warehouse. So that was just a dream. I must have fallen unconscious because of how excited I was, or maybe I was a bit anemic, I thought to myself, relieved, but Lorna started speaking while staring at me. Miss Maria obtained the lost light magic in that white dimension, as is now written on the covenant that she found yesterday. However, just opening the book won't work, you need to use light magic on it. Miss Maria, show Miss Katarina. It seemed that they had had time to research these things while I was knocked out. It was good that they'd learned how to read the book, but why would they show that to me all of a sudden? I couldn't understand Lorna's motives. Yes, Maria said while I was still thinking about it. She took the covenant out of her bag and used her light magic on it, at which point the book started glowing. Wow! So this is what the lost magic looks like, I thought while peeking inside the book. All I see is the usual ancient script. I imagined there would be magic light letters or something. I can see characters of light appearing in the book, but nobody else seems able to, explained Maria, who had probably guessed what I was thinking. That was probably something that only the people who had received the light orb's power could do. It really is a magic book, I said, impressed. Well, Miss Katarina, Lorna said, could you get your dark familiar out now? Hey? Why? I asked, confused by her sudden request. You heard Miss Maria. You need to use magic to see the characters hidden in the book. Which is why you need to use dark magic to read your dark covenant, she said as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. What? Wait, why? This book? I said, shocked, stringing words together as they came to me. You mean to ask why we know that your book is the Dark Covenant? We took a look at it before you woke up, and we realized that it's very similar to Maria's. It's a book on basic magic written in ancient script, with a black stone on the cover in the same place as the white one on her book. I have no idea where you found that, but it's almost an opposite version of Maria's covenant. The logical conclusion is that while we found the lost light magic, you obtained lost dark magic. Am I right? Lorna was speaking so fast, without even stopping to breathe, that I was left astonished. So they hadn't only examined Maria's book, but also the reason why I was unconscious. This would explain why none of the people around me were as surprised as I was. I couldn't help but be impressed by Lorna's reasoning. For as problematic of an employee as she was, her intelligence couldn't be denied. Did I get anything wrong? She asked, cocking her head to one side as I took my time to reply. And no, I think you are right, I said, and I went on to describe how I had brought that book from the warehouse back with me by coincidence, the black letters pouring down in the black dimension. And how I'd felt dizzy. But it all felt so distant, like a dream. I was just asking myself whether it really happened or not. That's what I imagined. You probably thought that it was all just a dream, so you could put the book back in the warehouse and stop thinking about it, right? Lorna said. Hey! Can she even read minds? You know, Miss Katarina, "You're the type who just shows everything she's thinking on her face," she said. "And if it really was a dream, then we can all stop thinking about it. But if it wasn't, that book could be useful for the ministry. Could you try out what I said?" To be honest, the memory of what happened in that dark dimension was so scary that I didn't feel like reliving it, but not knowing whether it really happened or not was unpleasant in itself. "Okay, I will. Poki, come out," I said, mustering my courage and summoning Poki as I opened the book. "Woof," he said, happy to come out of my shadow, and I saw a faint dark mist appear around the book. Sure enough, the page I had opened the book to was full of those black letters. More than just being written on the paper, it looked as if they were floating on top of it. "Judging from your face, you see the dark characters," Lorna said, looking at my shocked expression. "Yes," I said without taking my eyes off the book. I remembered being scared by them when I saw them pouring down from above, but now that they were neatly arranged on the pages, they only looked eerie and mysterious. "Now that we've figured that out, that's enough for today," Lorna said while forcefully closing the book in front of me. Now that I looked at it, Maria's book had been closed as well. "Cyrus and I are fine, but you two have directly received the lost magic, so we can't ignore the possible physical burden. Miss Katerina's frighteningly pale, and you, Miss Maria, aren't looking much better." Looking at Maria's complexion, I had to agree with her. I couldn't see it, but my face probably looked the same. "The covenant is not going anywhere, so we can look into it in a couple of days. You two just go home and rest." We were dismissed by Lorna, who said that it was probably better for Maria and I to keep our respective books. I put mine into my bag and prepared to go home. Maria was heading to the dormitory with Cyrus and Dewey, and I was heading back to Clay's mansion with Keith and Sora. We all walked out of the infirmary together and split up in front of the meeting room. Lorna said that she'd stay in the ministry since she had to look into some things. "Big sister is always getting herself into trouble no matter how much people warn her," Keith, to my right, said with a sigh. "She really is. If she had waited patiently in front of the stone, this would not have happened," replied Sora, to my left. "Oh no. At this rate, I'm going to be scolded bilaterally. But I found that lost magic, so it was worth it, wasn't it?" I said, while walking a couple of steps forward to strategically protect my flanks. It was then that I felt something, a cold, intense stare going through my back. "What is this?" I thought, turning back, but there was nobody in sight. Did I just imagine that? I looked at my arm and saw that it was covered in goosebumps. I had sensed something evil. "Big sister? What's wrong? Are you feeling dizzy again?" Keith and Sora were worried about me, but I couldn't bring myself to explain what had just happened. I felt that if I told them, I wouldn't be able to shake it off as just my imagination anymore. "Yes. I must be tired," I said, and we left together. "That must be it. I'm so tired that I'm imagining things," I told myself while rubbing the goosebumps off my arm. I reached the carriage, thanked Sora for seeing me off, and left the ministry without any more hint of that weird feeling from before. After reaching home and eating lunch, I went back to my room. When my stomach was full, I would usually fall asleep within seconds, whether in bed or in front of a desk. But I couldn't seem to get any rest today. This must have been because of the dream I just had. I had already seen FL2 in 2 dreams, one before joining the ministry and one right after, so this made it the 3rd time. I had gotten very little information out of it, but what little I learned was terrifying. Based on the dreams and on the note I had found, I knew that Katarina Clays, after being exiled, had come back as FL2's Villainess to take her revenge on Maria. Now I also knew that she'd found the Dark Covenant and had a dark familiar, that wolf-looking shadow, with her. This last bit of information reflected what had happened to me today. Obtaining dark magic and finding Poki, my dark familiar, were both coincidences. So was finding the Dark Covenant, or was it? The events around me were starting to resemble the game's plot to a scary extent. Back at the academy, I had been surprised when the other noble girls publicly shamed me in the dining hall despite how I'd never bullied Maria. And I thought that this was the game forcing one of its scenes to happen through its mysterious influence. Could the same have happened just now? And if so, how strong would that influence be? All of my friends had been there to help me at the dining hall, but I didn't know whether I could count on that again. I felt that the game's influence had gotten stronger ever since I had happened to find dark magic, a dark familiar, and the Dark Covenant. Maybe I would slowly turn into the game's Katarina and use the dark powers at my disposal to do evil, throwing myself into one of the routes leading to doom. The more I thought about it, the more anxious I became, and I wasn't getting any sleepier. Rather than lay in bed doing nothing, I decided to go to the garden to get some fresh air. I was sitting under a tree, enjoying the pleasant spring breeze and the sight of my vegetable field, when I heard a voice from behind me. "Big sister, didn't you say you were going to take a nap?" "Ah, Keith," I said, noticing my brother standing there. "I tried to, but I couldn't fall asleep." "You couldn't fall asleep," he repeated, surprised. "You, who always falls asleep minutes after eating." That was true, but maybe that wasn't something you should say to your sister's face. "What's wrong? Are you worried about something?" he asked, staring into my eyes. "Well, it's that. By sheer coincidence, I had followed the game's script and got my hands on dark magic, so I was worried about becoming a real villainess, losing all my friends, and having to face doom." Keith wouldn't be able to understand that, of course, since he didn't know that we were living in the world of an Otome game. "I obtained forbidden powers, and I'm worried that I could become evil and be hated by everyone, and eventually be doomed," I said, trying to explain my worries without mentioning the game. After all that mattered was what I was scared about: becoming evil, losing my friends, and winding up in a catastrophic scenario. I lowered my gaze and waited for Keith's answer. "You becoming evil and losing all your friends? That's something I have trouble even just imagining," he said with a troubled expression before sitting next to me. But look at all this dark magic stuff I've been involved in, it's still possible." Unfortunately, he didn't understand why I was so bothered. "Maybe, but it's unlikely." "Unlikely, yes, but not impossible." "Sure, but that could be said about most things." I wondered about whether Keith would end up fighting against me and defeating me in real life, just as in the game. Whether he ended up putting me in prison or killing me, I was sure that he would stare at me with cold, hateful eyes when he did it. "Even if that happens, I'll always be by your side," he said, much to my surprise. "Even if I become evil? Would you still say the same thing then?" He narrowed his blue eyes before replying. "Whatever the case, unless you want me to, I'll never leave you. You were the one to tell me that first, remember? You said you'd stay by my side even if I ended up hurting people because I couldn't control my magic." Now that he mentioned it, I remembered saying something like that. "Of course, I'd try to keep you from turning evil, though," he said with a playful smile. The sight of it made the fear inside my heart shrink down by several sizes. "Thank you, Keith. Please stay by my side," and make sure I don't do anything evil, I said, returning the smile. I really have a wonderful brother, I was thinking to myself when I heard a rustling sound behind me. Keith told us that we could wait in the mansion while he went to check on Katarina, so we should keep waiting. I am afraid that we should do as Big Brother says. We have waited long enough. We cannot let them stay that cozy with each other. I will go. Prince Jedward, please do not make such decisions on your own. And if anything, I should be the one to go, since I was the first one to reach the mansion. By only a few minutes. I am her fiancé, and as such, I should be the one to go. You may be her fiancé, but I am her friend. We even slept in the same room of the castle not that long ago. Oh, you mean that time when you did all you could to get between Katarina and me? You still think about that? I would have expected your skin to be tougher. Mary, Jedward, give it a break. This is no place for dispute. I turned to the direction that the scream had come from and saw Prince Alan, with his silver hair and blue eyes, tripping out of some bushes a short distance from me. Prince Alan. Oh hi, he said awkwardly while still lying on the ground. Prince Alan. Why would you go first like that? Exactly. You should let your older brother go first. This wouldn't have happened if you two hadn't been pulling at each other so much inside that tiny bush. Why am I the one being scolded here? Mary and Jedward also came out of the bush, followed by Sophia and Nicole, who asked me how I was feeling. Keith mumbled something like I told you people to wait, but I couldn't quite catch what he said. Excuse me, why is everyone here? I asked, surprised at seeing my friends there. Keith was the one to explain, with a disappointed look on his face. Sophia told everyone that you were feeling unwell, and they all came to visit. I thought that you were sleeping, so I told them to wait while I made sure. He said. Then, whispering so feebly that I couldn't hear it, if I knew they would bother us like this, I'd have sent them away at once. In short, they'd all come to visit me. Thank you, everyone. Since you are my fiancé, it is obvious that I would be worried about you. And, just so you know, I will be by your side whatever may happen forever, Jedward said with a smile, grabbing my hand. Realizing that he must have heard the conversation between Keith and me, I felt a bit embarrassed. Me too, said Mary, pushing Jedward aside. I will never leave you. And I will be sure to scold you should you ever stray from the path of righteousness. So she also wouldn't leave me if I became evil. I think that forbidding her from eating sweets would be more effective than scolding her, said Alan, grinning. If that happens, I will also stop lending you novels until you behave. Sophia, visibly pained by her own words, said. Whatever you end up doing, none of us will ever leave you. We will always keep supporting you, Nicole said with his dangerously attractive smile. It's not just Keith, all of them will stay with me, letting me know if I'm doing something wrong. Thank you, all of you, I said from the bottom of my heart. The fear that had burdened me so much had now completely disappeared. I couldn't do anything by myself, but, with the support of all my friends, I was sure that everything would be fine. Feeling better, I kept chatting with them and then, that night, I slept like a baby. On the first day of the next week, I went to work with the Covenant in my bag. On the way to the Magical Tool Laboratory office, I met some employees from other departments. When I greeted them, they greeted me back. When I had first started working, most people had either been too formal because of my rank as a duke's daughter, or they had talked with me as if they'd rather avoid me altogether, but lately, this had happened less and less. Even people who knew that I was Katarina Clays would talk normally with me, and this made me incredibly happy and motivated to work harder. Larna and Sora were waiting for me in the office, and we walked together to the meeting room, where we met with Maria, Cyrus, and Dewey. Once we were all sitting down, Larna took the 2 covenants from Maria and me. "Thanks to your efforts," she said cheerfully, "we have obtained not 1, but 2 lost magic books. Early this morning I made a report to my superiors and got permission to study them further. Hence, since you all helped in finding these books, I would like you to proceed with their analysis." "All these people working on just 2 books? Did you forget how much the ministry is understaffed right now?" Cyrus complained. Of course. We will take turns and only do it in the free time between our official duties. However, I would like Maria and Katarina to have a more active role in this investigation, which could potentially become very useful for the magical ministry. "Can I ask for your help?" she said, looking at us. "Yes," said Maria. "Yes," I agreed. "We don't have a lot of time to spend on this meeting today. Would you start reading the content of the books?" Larna asked. Maria and I opened the respective books, after which she activated her light magic and I called out Poki. The black letters appeared on the book. Hence I put forth the whole of my knowledge of light magic. Maria shyly started reading, making Larna let out an enthusiastic "oh." And then, everyone looked at me. Their stares were telling me to hurry up and read the book. However, I looked at the black letters in front of me and sighed. I have to say it, don't I? Just because they can't see the book, I can't lie and make something up on the spot. It's going to be embarrassing, but I made up my mind. I am sorry. I cannot read a single word of ancient script. I felt the tension silently building up in the room. Had this been an anime, there would be a cricket sound effect. Everyone had dropped their jaws, but Larna was the first one to get hers off the floor. Yes, I should have realized that. A book as ancient as this would be written in ancient script. And you wouldn't be able to read it, she said, disappointed, as I quietly nodded. Then, she said, handing me paper and pen, just write down the letters you see. You should be able to do that much. I will. I said. For a second I was scared that they'd force me to learn ancient script, so I was very relieved that I could just write it down for them to read. I took the pen in my hand, placed it on the paper, and I can't write. Why? My hand wouldn't move. I tried writing down some random modern letters, and I had no problem doing that. What was going on? When I try writing down the letters from this book, my hand just stops moving. That figures. What? It does. There's magic on that book that prevents anyone but those with the right powers from reading it. I expected that it wouldn't let you copy its contents that easily. Oh, I see. So, if I can't copy down the letters, that means... Katarina, Larna said with the friendliest, most pleasant smile I'd ever seen, as she put a hand on my shoulder. This is for the good of the whole ministry. Learn to read ancient script and analyze the contents of the book. Thank you in advance. Wait. Not only did I have to study ancient script, of which, at that point, I couldn't read a single letter, but I also had to analyze the book itself. Have mercy. I want to refuse, but Larna wouldn't allow me to anyway. Let's do our best together. Maria, who was in the same boat as me, except for already being able to read ancient script, said with a smile that I could never say no to. My response was a single, prolonged moan of pain aimed at no one in particular. I thought I had been lucky to be assigned to a department where most duties were simple manual labor, but now, because of this covenant. I stared at the book in my hands with contempt. You could start by borrowing an ancient script dictionary, Dewey promptly suggested, but I didn't have enough energy left to reply. Losing time sitting here won't make things any better, Sora said, and I begrudgingly stood up from my chair. The book still had the magic black letters on it, lots of them. Thinking that I had to translate all of that was enough to give me a headache, even if for different reasons than the one I'd had inside the dark dimension. Rather than any bad end, it's probably this book that'll be the death of me. And thus began my next mission at the Ministry, learning to read, deciphering and analyzing the Covenant.